मैं अपने गांव की पहली लेडी हेल्थ वर्कर थी। जब हमारी तनख्वाह 1200 थी। जब मैंने पहली मरतबा 1000 का नोट देखा, मैं हैरान हो गई। ये तो मैंने नोट कभी भी नहीं देखा। जैसे जैसे हम काम आगे बढ़ते गए वैसे वैसे हमने देखा तो पैसे कम थे, काम ज़्यादा था। तनख्वाह भी नहीं मिलती थी, 3-3 महीने हो जाते थे, 4-4 महीने हो जाते, तनख्वाह नहीं मिलती थी। फिर भी हम काम करते थे। सिर्फ पैसे का मसला नहीं है, जब हम बाहर जाते हैं ना, लोग भी बहुत तंग करते हैं हमें। तो लोग हमें गालियाँ भी देते हैं, उल्टी सीधी बातें भी हमारे से करते हैं, बहुत बुरे तरीके से पेश आते हैं। मैंने बहुत सारी औरतों से सुना भी है और उन्होंने बताया कि लोग हमें हिरासा करते हैं। ये हमारे साथ ज़्यादती है कि लोग हमें हिरासा करते हैं, फिर भी हम काम अपना जारी रखते हैं। हम इस्लामाबाद तक, पार्लियामेंट हाउस तक भी गए, धरने लगाए। हम सुप्रीम कोर्ट गए अपने हुकूक के लिए, ताकि हमें रेगुलर किया जाए, हमारी तनख्वाहें रेगुलर की जाए।
वो यकीन दिला रहे हैं कि खुशनूर अख्तर लाचारी साहब से भी, नरगिस सेठी साहिबा से भी और फेडरल गवर्नमेंट से उनकी खुद जाती तौर पे बात हुई है और इमीडिएट रिलीज हो जाएंगे आपके पैसे।
हमें अपनी यूनियन पे बहुत फख्र है, बहुत हमने कामयाबी की है, लेकिन अभी भी कुछ काम बाकी है और अपने हुकूक भी मिले हैं। कौन सोच सकता है कि जब मैं 25 साल की थी तो मैं कपास पे जाती थी, मैं कपास चुनने जाती थी। आज मैं लेडी हेल्थ वर्कर हूँ, अपने और अपने साथियों के हुकूक के लिए लड़ रही हूँ।
Thank you very much. I see we still have some appetite for some warming up. So we would have a brief union song. We gonna roll, we gonna roll, we gonna roll, we gonna roll the union on. We gonna roll, we gonna roll, we gonna roll. We gonna roll the union on. We gonna roll, we gonna roll. We gonna roll the union on. We gonna roll, we gonna roll, we gonna roll, we gonna roll the union on. Thank you very much. Gradually from our first panel discussion, which looked at the changes in the world of work since our last Congress in 2017, we are having our set panel discussion for the Congress, and it's going to be the way forward for trade union rights.
So I'll go into talking about the panel, but first I have a quick announcement from the PSI Comms department, who I hope are going to put something up on the screen for me. If you have WhatsApp on your phone, I know lots of you do, because I'm in lots of WhatsApp chats with lots of you. There it is. We're going to get out your phones, see it up there, scan it, and that'll put you into PSI groups that'll keep you up to date with really important information. And it'll go beyond just this Congress. So please do that now. Has everyone had a chance? I'm seeing lots of phones out. I'll give you a couple more seconds and then I'll jump into the panel. All right, so we're very excited. The facilitator for this panel is Marcelo Di Stefano. He is a lawyer, master and doctor in labour law, is a professor at the University of Buenos Aires and author of numerous publications on the subject. As a trade union leader, he currently holds the Executive Secretariat of the Confederation of University Workers of the Americas, is a member of the Executive Council of the Trade Union Confederation of the Americas, and on behalf of the Argentine Federation of National University Workers, is co-chair of the Global Network of Education Support Workers of Public Services International. Now, that is a very impressive bio. Over to you now, Marcelo. We look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I thought I was going to have to sing to wake you up after lunch, but fortunately the Latin Americans chipped in and who were very happy to sing a song from Soy Stereo group from a band from my country, which I think does have something to do with what we have discussed here. During the military dictatorship during the 60s and 70s in Latin America, we were not allowed to listen to rock in Spanish because it was symbol of protest, a symbol of protest. And so after recovering democracy in the southern part of Latin America, the bands started appearing, singing freedom songs. So it's very important for us to listen to Soy Stereo to give us strength to start this afternoon. Okay, now we can be serious and we have to talk about human rights, trade union rights. This very important panel will introduce the discussion we'll have on the plan of action within which we be organizing our struggle for the coming years. It is a discussion that we are proud to have because without a shadow of doubt, PSI, under the leadership of Rosa Pavanelli, has been one of the strongest voices and the most critical voices in all the international fora and also within the very trade union movement. We would like to say very strong that the need there is to fight against the corporative power, and we're absolutely convinced, certain, that Danny will continue down this road with everyone's support. Trade union rights are at the very heart of our global trade union. They are the raison d'etre of the PSI. It is the defense of trade union rights. And then you have the sectoral organization, and then you have the equality policies, and then you throw the basis of solidarity and working together to defend union rights. We have two global structures that are absolutely fundamental. On the one hand, the International Labour Organization, and on the other side, the International Trade Union Confederation. Regarding the ILO, we all hope that under the leadership of someone coming from the trade union movement, we would have a period where we would witness progress for workers. However, we are witnessing since 2012 up until now the blockage by employers who deny the doctrine of including right to strike in Convention 87. Furthermore, the International Trade Union Confederation is about to elect its new authorities, and they went back to the Qatar Gate, weakening their position, their international position, and delaying the implementation of the plan of action. In this panel, we are going to invite you to reflect on these problems, but we also invite you to turn to the future with the optimism which is ours. Us trade unionists, I repeat, trade union rights at the very heart of the PSI. But before starting, we are going to try with you to carry out a participative exercise. We always criticize and say that we fall prey to new means of communication, but humbly we're going to start in small doses to start including some of the functions of these new technologies. I invite you with your telephone, just as I'm going to do. I invite you to register this QR code. Please put up your phone. Please help me. This is the app, Slido, with which we are going to carry out some joint exercises of interaction. First, we have an introduction, which is the following. In these times, more than ever before, one image is worth more than 1,000 words. Is that true? Do you believe that? One image or picture is worth more than 1,000 words? Yes. So here we are in a position to have more than 1,000 pictures or images. So we're going to save millions of words, but we're going to be able to represent some ideas. I invite you to take an active part in this panel, and we're going to, with our telephones now, we're going to see how it all works. So I ask you to choose an emoticon to express our opinion or a feeling on the position of the ILO employers that deny us the right to strike. I'm going to try. Let's see if it works. Here we go. Yes. So I invite you. I imagine that they're all horrible and ugly. I'd hope we don't have any employers hidden here, right? So I invite you to come hand in hand with us, and we look at the different expressions. Look how the images, the negative image in red, is gaining volume, and that it is clearly the position of the union movement. That is of absolute rejection of the denial to the right to strike. And I also invite you, with the same app, Slido, to ask questions to the panelists. And if you want, if you see a question that does reflect what you are thinking, you can put a like, and then we'll obviously have to transmit the questions to the panelists. So I hope you're going to take an active part in the panel this afternoon. It is an exercise that we're carrying out, and we will see how it works out whilst the emoticons grow on the screen. Thank you. We're now going to introduce our first panelist. We have with us Frank Hofer, who is the Executive Director of the Virtual Academy of the Global Labour University, and he's also part of the Council of La Coluna of Global Work as a member of and in support of the independent Belarus trade unions, and he also works as an expert in social dialogue at the ILO, as well as salary policies and labour laws. We would like to welcome you, and on the basis of this Qatar Gate, we have given more attention to your opinions, because in principle they were opinions. We realized that what you were saying was absolutely true and clearly critical. So, on that basis, what we want to ask you some questions. The first question would be, do you believe that international trade unionism has a strategy to get out of this paralysis, out of this crisis? A period that starts with the conflict against the right to strike at the ILO, and that moved on to the Qatar Gate today.
Thank you very much, Marcelo. And let me start with that I joined the public sector union 44 years ago in my home country, Germany. A couple of years later, I was sacked, and my union defended me. And it's a great pleasure to be at this international conference where my union belongs to a great family of public sector unions. Let me split the question a bit up. Let's look at Qatar first. I think for the international labor movement, Qatar was a moral catastrophe. It was a betrayal, and it was an embarrassment. I mean, the moral catastrophe is clear. I mean, no one in the world was surprised that Qatar can buy FIFA. But then we heard that Qatar money was also the pocket of the leader of the biggest democratic organization of the world. That was a catastrophe for a lot of trade unionists who believe in this organization. And on that point, I think the labor movement acted clear and decisively. The man is no longer the general secretary of the organization. That was the only choice, and I think that was the right step. The second point is the betrayal. There are millions of workers in Qatar who believe in trade union movements, who are denied the right to organize, And if we go in this country as a labor movement and think if we discuss with the dictators, their life will be better, and not insisting that they have the right to be organized, that's a betrayal. And that is something where we have to ask ourselves, how could this happen? And that gets me to the third point, to the embarrassment. If a general secretary of the ITUC is on the Qatar television of the Ministry of Labor and says the Qatar government became a friend of the international labor movement, how can a dictatorship which does not allow workers to organize become a friend of the international trade union movement? How could this happen? And in my understanding, there's one thing which is simple. Someone takes money and sells out. And we solve that problem. There's a second problem, and I call this hubris, arrogance, and lack of democracy. What I mean is that someone thinks, if I negotiate smartly with the dictators, I can convince them and they become benevolent dictators. And I don't have to bring migrant workers with me. I don't have to bring my unions with me. It's just me who's negotiating it, and I don't have to discuss this in my movement, and I can take a 180% turnaround of criticizing Qatar to saying now workers can enjoy decent work in Qatar. But the question is, it's easy to blame the General Secretary. I think we have to blame all of us. How can a massively democratic labor movement allow that a General Secretary gets out of control? And I think that is, if we want to learn something from Qatargate, two important lessons. You want to elect the right person as a General Secretary. I wasn't here when you had the election, but I heard you unanimously made a good choice at this conference. But the second point is we have to help this General Secretary of any organization that he stays or she stays on track. And that means we need democracy, debate, and we need some checks and balances in the organization. How is it possible that powerful leaders allowed the General Secretary to do these stupid things not only on Qatar, but also her friendship initiatives with China and other things? It is that there is a risk because the international work is so far away from our daily life that it gets a life on its own, and that is why democracy is so important. And that's also what makes trade unions different, I think, from NGOs. It's organizations by workers, of workers, and for workers. And these three things have to be taken together. That gets me to the second point you were raising, the right to strike. Let's start with one thing. The difference between trade unions and other organizations is we not only have the power of arguments, we also have the argument of power. Trade unions are the only ones who, by withdrawing their labor, can insert massive pressure on employers, but also on governments who get off the rail. Now, therefore, strike always has to be used careful, intelligently, and with strategic considerations. But that makes trade unions different. And no one understands that better than the employers at the ILO. And that's why they choose to attack the right to strike, because we had massive successes. With the ILO Declaration of '98, the right to freedom of association became a fundamental right. And it went all over the place. Codes of conduct, framework agreements, trade agreements, and suddenly companies were directly signing up, we agree with Convention 87. And it becomes relevant, what does Convention 87 mean? And suddenly the employers realized, oh, it means that we have to accept that workers can strike. And because they couldn't stop that Convention 87 was a human right all over the place, they want to undermine it. And I think, in a way, they did it in a brutal way that we shouldn't talk about employers in that context, not about social partners, but about what they behave like. They are, in this point, class enemies. And that point, I think we have to be clear. The battle now about the right to strike is fundamentally whether we want to have a union which is a union only in name or a union which can really act. And therefore, now, after 10 years, the workers at the ILO decided to go to the International Court of Justice. And we hope we get a decision that they recognize the right to strike. But it is dangerous. Dangerous because in a court you don't get justice, you get a judgment. You get a decision. So we don't know what we get. But we have to be clear, whatever we get, it is the minimum. So if the court says, okay, you have the right to strike, but it's narrowed to the area of collective bargaining, that's then the minimum. But at the countries, I think as a labor movement, we have to say the right to strike is the right to defend our interests. And if we lose that, we lose our identity. And that in particular, if we talk about international things, I think a key point is we will have to think also about solidarity strikes. We have to think, if we have global supply chains, if we have a global connectedness, then if we have a global health chain, then we have to think how workers can also develop tools like solidarity strikes. So I think it is a fundamental battle. It's not just a court case. We have to, at every country, make that an issue to say, if you want democracy, you need trade unions. If you want to have trade unions, you need to have real trade unions, and real trade unions don't exist without the right to strike, full stop. Okay, I have probably 2 minutes. So that third point, what are the challenges, in my view, for the trade union movement? And it's a humble view of an individual. I don't have a mandate, but it gives me the freedom just to say what I think. I would say it's 5C. It's credibility, it's competence, it's concepts, it's collaboration, and it's courage. Let me just give a few words on this. Credibility has 2 levels. The one is the personal credibility of our leaders and of our activists at every level. If a company behaves like shit, no one is really worried because they think, well, they're there for making money and moral doesn't sell. But if trade unions are bribed, not have personal integrity, we lose all the credit we have. So the personal credibility of our people is decisive. The second is political credibility. If we are silent about, let's say, the dictatorship in some countries because we don't find this convenient, if we think we can collaborate with all unions, even Chinese trade unions who have nothing in common with a free trade union, then people will say, look, where is your moral compass? And it's also true for our own unions. For example, I have been fighting for Belarusian colleagues who are in prison, who try to get out of the country. We are fighting that the government is isolated. But then we have govs who have these state-controlled unions as their members and say they can stay in our organization. I don't get this. I think it is a question of our moral credibility as an organization. Second point, competence. It's great to have a seat at the table. That's what the union movement has demanded all the time. But if you have a seat at the table, you have to have something to say. You have to know what is the policies we propose. You have to think this is our criticism, this is what we think is wrong, and this is what we're suggesting. Third is what I call concept or a program. It's not enough to say we are for a fair world. I think we have to go back to some daring, transformative radicalism, I would say. Something to say, certain things have to get out of profit. I think your slogan is absolutely right. People above profit. So we have to think about public sector, about other issues which we want to take out of the market control. And we need a programmatic vision which goes beyond what the ILO or the UN has decided. If you think the union program is the decent work program of the ILO, you are already lost, because the decent work program at the ILO is a tripartite compromise. We have to be asking for a bit more. Last point, second, collaboration. Unions might not be able to do everything on their own, but there is just not a single example in the world that there's a democratic, fair society without strong unions. And we have to look, first we need a collaboration between our international level and our national levels. That's why we have engaged in the Global Labour University to create as many horizontal links between unions as well, to build a global community. And secondly, we have to look who are our partners in society, to build broader alliances. But we have to maintain in this our own identity, that we are, as I said, an organization by workers, for workers, and of workers. And finally, we need courage. What I mean is, we have all our cozy comfort zone of institutional roles in our societies. And if you pick a fight, you might lose this. But if you don't pick a fight, we will lose it just more slowly. Thank you.
Bravo, Frank. Realmente.
Congratulations, Frank. You have spoken with a lot of strength. You've moved aside diplomatic jargon used at the ILO, and you've said things with your heart, as we always do in the union movement. I'm now going to give the floor to Sue Longley, who is the General Secretary of the International Union of Food Workers of the IUF. That is the IUF, an international trade union federation that represented those working in the food and farming sector. She was elected in 2017. She is the first woman to occupy this post, and she was before Deputy Secretary General of the ILO and Coordinator for Agriculture and Plantations. Her work before for the trade union with IUF in the United Kingdom, which is now the union, where she had different posts. She was Director of Land Workers. Sue, can we ask you about the challenges, the specific challenges of your global union regarding trade union rights and regarding what was said by Frank? I would like to remind the room that IUF led the process that led to Convention 189, one of the best conventions we have today for workers, household workers, and furthermore, it is one of the international confederations with the greatest number of global agreements. So, Sue, my question is, can global union lead the change that is required? And can this help overcome the problems confronted by ITUC? Can we see this working hand in hand? Thank you.
Thank you, Marcelo. And first of all, let me echo Frank's words. What a great pleasure it is to be here at the PSI Congress and to see so many delegates from around the world. I also want to take this opportunity to pay tribute to the leadership that Rosa gave, not just of PSI, but of the global labor union movement. And I think the agenda that we're discussing today, this very frank discussion on trade union rights, comes very much out of Rosa's leadership. Danny, also, congratulations. I look forward very much to continuing the strong relationship that the IUF has with PSI. You offer us a very challenging question, but I think my answer to that is actually quite simple. I don't think the global trade union movement is me or any other general secretary. The global trade union movement is all of you, all of our affiliates throughout the movement. And I think the answer in some ways is quite simple. And to paraphrase, if we don't do it, who will? We do not have the luxury of not building a strong global trade union movement to fight the many challenges that we have to face. The IUF is not one of the biggest global unions, but we represent a huge workforce. The agricultural workforce in particular is the workforce around the world that is denied its rights, often from legislation, no right to be in a union, the geographical challenges, feudal landowners. So we've battled with this question of freedom of association and how that is key to enabling the other rights for a long time. And I think that has to be the core of our fight back. Picking up some of Frank's comments, it is tempting to take the place at the table, but if you're going to that table, what are you going to do? In the IUF, I have to be very, very straight with you. We try to avoid words like social dialogue, those phrases. The employers are not our social partners. The best they are is our counterparts in a good dialogue. But I think we have, over years, got too much sucked in to the discussion around social partnership, being multi-stakeholders. But no, the workers we represent are much more than stakeholders. They're parts of industry, they're parts of society, and we have to make sure that their voice is felt. So for me, we have a very clear role as the global trade union movement. We have to go back, in some ways, back to basics, back to the fundamentals of fighting for those key rights. Freedom of association has to be at the center of our work. We have to make sure also that we are an inclusive and a welcoming trade union movement. I think in particular, we have to make sure, don't know what the average age of your Congress is, but looking to the young workforce, making sure they feel what the movement can give to them, making sure we are inclusive of migrant workers, of workers irrespective of their race or community, irrespective of sexual orientation, and building that trade union movement has to be key. I do think that ensuring that our movement is democratic and independent also has to be at the heart of our work. And maybe this is one of the challenges for us as global union federations. I'm sure every union federation has its definition and tries to respect its definition. But I do think one of the things that we should look at globally is a common definition of what is an independent and democratic trade union. Frank has mentioned the example of China. The IUF has a policy of no collaboration with the All China Trade Union Confederation. Similarly, all government-controlled federations we exclude from membership. But is there something that we could do as global unions to have a clearer definition? A number of countries, I think, are really key to defining this, but I do think that common vision and developing that is crucial to both the integrity, but also coming out of Qatargate. What is the message we send? We have never been involved in Qatar. We were under pressure to. There's a huge hospitality sector there. But we were clear that until the Qatari government commits to signing Convention 87, I don't want to hear any more about roadmaps and good intentions down the road now. We need the confirmation now that Qatar will sign and implement Convention 87. Otherwise, I think even with the best of intentions, we're kidding ourselves, and workers in Qatar, in the long run, will not thank us for that. So freedom of association, ensuring that key right for all workers around the world, ensuring that our movement is democratic and independent of both government and company control, has to be key to the way forward.
Muchas gracias, Sue.
Very much, Sue.
Y aprovecho unos
I would
minutos
like
que
to
nos
take
quedan para
advantage of the minutes we still have
respecto a los acuerdos
to
marcos
look
globales.
in a little bit more
Tenemos en
to
claro que fueron
the
instrumentos esperanzadores,
global framework agreements. They did give us some hope. Some people talked about a revolution that didn't take place. Indeed, it gave us hope, but they didn't have the impact that we hoped that such a global framework agreement would have. How useful are they today? What must we maintain, and what must be changed to improve the working conditions of the supply chains?
Yeah, I don't think in the IUF we ever saw them as revolutionary. Revolutionary would be taking controls of the means of production, ensuring that the food resources are used for the public good and not for the increasing wealth of those few transnational companies that increasingly control the food chain. We saw international framework agreements, and you're right, we were one of the first global unions to sign such an agreement, and we now have developed quite a few. But I think for us, they were always a tool. They're not the means to an end, they're a tool to establish a way for us to bargain with those companies. In our sectors, we see the increasing control of transnational companies at all parts, but in particular in the food sector. 5, 6 companies controlling the food and beverage sector, fewer and fewer companies controlling, for instance, access to seeds and those sort of resources. So the framework agreements were trying to build a union power as a counterweight to the power of those transnational companies. And you're right, they didn't give us the results exactly as we were expecting them. I think for us, we thought that they were a tool to open the door for our affiliates to go and organize in those companies. But it proved more complicated than that. How do you make sure the affiliates are aware of the agreements? How do we use them? How do we make sure that we have a way of raising complaints with companies? So we've refined our thinking on global framework agreements. It's very much more about getting the company to recognize that the IUF is the representative voice of workers in our sector, and to agree to a table to meet with us, usually twice a year, to discuss principally rights issues. And always it comes back to that freedom of association, how we make sure that workers in those companies can organize in a union and be represented by a union. I think every agreement, whether it's an ILO convention or whatever sort of agreement it is only as strong as our ability as trade unions to implement it. And that's the same with the global framework agreements. For us, we're continually trying to push the agenda with companies. So we've now developed that basic agreement, which is about basically respecting the core rights of the ILO, freedom of association, collective bargaining, equality, no discrimination, and no forced and child labour, now expanded to occupational health and safety. How we expand that to a wider engagement. So we have now also signed a couple of agreements with key transnational companies to work together to eliminate sexual harassment in IUF sectors, in particular in agriculture and hospitality. Sexual harassment is unfortunately endemic. And here I have to say we have been able to get quite a lot of agreement with companies about tackling this. We've also recently, following the adoption of Convention 190 on elimination of violence, started to engage companies on a common platform to eliminate domestic violence. So we've tried to broaden the agenda of the framework agreements, but I would come back, I think, to my key point, that any agreement is only as strong as our ability as trade unions to enforce it. And that brings us back to how we organize, how we build trade union strength in the workplace.
Muchas gracias, Sue.
Thank you very much, Sue. And I would ask you to answer the questions, which will make it easier for the facilitator during the second round to choose the questions coming from the public. It is now Françoise Heng, who is hospital administrator and member of the National Executive of the Health Federation and Social Action Federation of the CCG Santé in France, the Confédération Générale du Travail, Fédération de la Santé de l'Action Sociale. She was also president of the Employment Section and Social Affairs and Citizenship of the ECOSOC, and she was also vice chairman of the European Trade Union Federation for Public Services. A lot of titles, a lot of very heavy past, a lot of responsibilities. We're discussing global framework agreements. Françoise has been very active, trade union activist in one of the main sectors, that is the health sector for the PSI, in particular after the pandemic, with the lack of rights that became blatant during the pandemic. Her role was key to sort of try and run against a global framework agreement without any consultation of the workers. There was a lot of people know what this is about, but I think we should probably put this a title. Orpea. A lot of people here know what we're talking about, but some of the members here in the room don't know this. So, Françoise, please, as a university teacher, could you please help us discuss exactly what the threats and challenges that we have to face on the basis of your experience in the recent Orpea conflict? And we would also ask you to tell us a little bit about the trade union strategy.
First of all, sisters and brothers, let me say that seen from up here, you look absolutely terrific. It's wonderful to see this hall full of trade unions from all over the world. I'm so impressed. I'm grateful to PSI for having invited me to participate in this panel. Let me begin by telling you what Orpea is. Orpea is one of the large French groups, I mean a really big French group with more than 70,000 staff around the world, 80% of whom work in Europe, and half of those in France. So 35,000 employees in France working in retirement homes, home workers, clinics. They also work in psychiatric clinics. So it's a huge group, Orpea. And CGT, but also CFDT, some of my friends from CFDT are here. We fought this group together because we had never encountered anything more like the mafia than this group. The minute you complained, you were sacked, and there were dozens of people in that situation. We know our members and who were employees. We talked about the abuse that was affecting employees, union reps, and also abuse to patients. We pointed up all this, and we fought and fought and fought for years. Unfortunately, the relations between Orpea and the forces that be in France were such that the scandal was simply muffled. It was held down until one day a journalist decided to write a book because that person had heard about abuse to patients, that some people had died. And so that person wrote a book. They got in touch with us at CGT, obviously, and we spent 3 years working on the book. Took 3 years to write the book, but it was fleshed out with witness statements, evidence from all sorts of corners, both oral evidence and written evidence. We had legal people helping us, providing evidence. And so once this book was published, it was like an explosion in France. It was a huge scandal. We knew about it, but now it was out in the open. And the French population, the whole population reacted in such a way that they decided the attitude of these large groups, I mentioned Orpea, but there are more than 20 of these large groups who make a lot of money, that all that should be investigated and come out into the open. We discovered that Orpea abused patients, they reduced the food rations, they didn't give them enough incontinence pads, the staff were ill-treated, there were patients who died and the families weren't properly informed. There were terrible things. And some patients paid more than 6,000 euros a month to have their parent or relative in a really bad care home. Well, the book came out, and as I said, it was like an explosion. And this resulted in the authorities reacting because they were pushed by the public at large. Police investigations were carried out and the financial investigation too, because these people have access to a lot of money, public money, our money, but that is then handed out to shareholders. They are not accountable. They're not required to account for money they don't spend. So what they do is cut down on the standard of service and cut down on staff levels, making the working conditions worse and worse, in addition to not paying the staff. Orpea's employees have not had a raise because Orpea never wanted to negotiate for 15 years, not a single increase in the wages and salaries of these employees of Orpea. We got in touch with EPSU, or we worked together with EPSU. I'm a vice president of EPSU, actually. So together with EPSU, we tried to set up a European Works Council. We twisted Orpea's arm. They didn't want to have hear any of it. We talked about it for 3 years. They didn't want to know, but the legal minimum had to be applied, and that was all we could have, and that was really the minimum because there was no collective agreement. CGT and CFDT, the two French unions, decided before the book was published, we ordered some work from SICTAR, who did a fantastic job of work, extremely thorough and very good, and they really helped us in our battle against this large group. A year before CIPTA started working, we gave them some information, and they worked on financial circuits. They checked how they were investing money in tax havens, and that helped us because we were able to provide the Ministry of Finance in France with the information that they didn't actually even have. So we really were very happy to have been able to conduct this inquiry with CIPCAR. We had to hand it over to the press, unfortunately, on the very same day as Russia attacked Ukraine. That was the day we presented this to the press. And in spite of that, there was a huge press presence, journalists in presence. We have seen that our struggle over 10 years has borne fruit, and we were happy because we knew that Orpea, the group, obviously all the management was sacked, lots of things have changed. We were really happy to have been able to start a positive trend for the employees and also for the way in which they are treated. That's what we thought would happen, but the book then came out. Well, the book came out at the end of January, and at the beginning of April, we were absolutely dumbfounded. I spent a lot of time reading the press and looking at the social media, and here I read that a global framework agreement has been concluded between the mafiosos at Orpea and a World Trade Union organization called Global Union. We were gobsmacked. Not one word, no contact with any French trade union organization or even at European level. I can let you see the agreement they signed by people in Orpea who today are in jail, signed by a union organization which has no legitimacy whatsoever. And as our colleague was saying a moment ago, what matters is how a global framework agreement is implemented. That's what matters. But first it has to be concluded and negotiated with the workers and the people who are involved. But if it's concluded without the wage earners having been consulted by their trade union organization, that is a worthless agreement. And what makes it even worse, at that time, they wanted to convey the image of an excellent employer, thereby stabbing us in the back. We, the French trade unions, who, once again, I say, we represent more than half the workforce of Orpea. How was it possible that for so many years Orpea had been able to do what they did? They were able to actually buy a framework agreement. They bought a trade union called Syndicat Arc-en-Ciel, the Rainbow Union. That's a non-existent trade union. But they were able to become #1 trade union with more than 70%. But we had proof, we had evidence to prove that the elections had been rigged. So we filed a complaint with FO and CGT and CFDT, all three of us. We filed a suit with the courts in France, and the court gave us right, told us we were right. The elections were cancelled and a new election was held. Now, obviously, today, the question is, what becomes of a framework agreement which has no legitimacy other than it was signed by mafiosi employers who are even criminals, because some have been in prison for 6 months. There will be other suits. They've had to pay 50 million to the state, pay back 50 million euros to the state, and there's more to come. So the legitimacy of this GFA, well, part of the people responsible for it are behind bars, but secondly, there's an organization involved. We asked through Philippe Martinez and Laurent Berger for CFDT and CGT, we asked to have this framework agreement withdrawn. It was a political error to sign this agreement. The agreement was not withdrawn, but don't worry, it has had no effect. We were told, Uniglobal told us, Uniglobal said, well, we signed it because it will benefit 2% of the employees worldwide. That's absurd. Not even 2% are going to have any benefit whatsoever out of this global framework agreement. So really, I think trade union democracy, that really begins where the workers are. It's at the level of the workers, not at the top of the union organization. The workers of all in one country who live there, who work there, it's up to them to discuss things with their organization, and then you go on up from there. Trying to drop something down from the top in a parachute, that never works. It's a betrayal. Our colleague Frank talked about betrayal. Well, this is a betrayal of the workers of the trade union organization. It damages our reputation. What do the employees of Orpea, what can they possibly think of an agreement which they were not consulted on? Between the Orpea and an organization that doesn't even exist. We're not going to give up. Certainly my organization is not going to sit on our hands. We're going to file a suit in the courts. The elections, the rigged elections were cancelled. There were others too, but they were foreclosed. Anyway, the agreement that was signed has no legitimacy whatsoever, since the courts have recognized that the elections were cancelled because they were rigged, for sure. So we're not going to give up. And my colleagues, I can tell you that union power, that's you. It's you and your reps in the workplace. It's up to you to say stop when there are organizations who think that they have the right to speak on behalf of the workers. You've got to put a stop to that. I don't think the only reason that they did what they did was to improve the reputation of Orpea, make them look good, help them look good. But as I said, it was really a stab in the back of the CGT and the CFDT. To have anything to do with employers like these who are basically mafiosi, many in prison, the trade union organizations in the country are not going to keep their mouths shut and do nothing. So the message I would leave with you is you need to build agreements with the workers on the basis of what is best for them. You know best what's good for you. Your union reps are the best to tell them what you need. Don't have it done by people who come from whatever country, who sign things in secret. They used Orpea's methods. Orpea never communicated, obviously, with the trade unions because they had banned them, but they did everything at the last minute and secretly. And this rainbow union played into the hands of Orpea, and that is damaging for all of us. It's a terrible example, but I can assure you we are not going to let this stand.
Without a shadow of doubt, we are going to win, and I think they're going to be able to express so, Françoise, with the trade unions of France, with EPSO. I think the PSI is very strong globally. Not only do we have to fight against corporate power and employers, but sometimes also against sister organizations which do not understand the meaning of solidarity, but we do have the strength to do so. I would like to remind you that you can continue putting questions, and now we're going to change the screen because we're going to have a presentation now. We're going to invite Sung Hee. She can come up to the rostrum. She is Director of Foreign Affairs of the Korean Trade Union of Public Service Workers and Transport, KPTU, since August 2020, before she worked in the Korean Trade Union of Government Employees, and a member of the Trade Union of Korean Metal Workers. She is interested in strengthening public services equality, labor rights, women's rights, and the violation of human rights committed in the past because of state violence. Sung Hee, talking about more traditional strategies or more conventional strategies strategies. We have here the representative of a trade union who has fought, a committed trade union that has made an effort, a very important one, in a context which is truly very difficult when it comes to defending workers' rights, as is the context of Korea. During this last period, KPTU has made important achievements, and I think they do deserve the recognition of our Congress, thanks to activism, union activism, very strong activism. They have achieved the ratification of Conventions 87 and 98 of the ILO. I think this does deserve a warm round of applause. And not only did they manage to achieve that, but they did that in full swing of the COVID crisis, when the world was paralyzed, and when it was very extremely difficult to establish a struggle process. The question, what legacy did you get from this struggle you had to get these conventions ratified, and what was the strategy to guarantee now the true implementation of freedom of association and collective bargaining?
Hello, comrades. As introduced, I'm Sung Hee-oh, International Director of the KPTU, representing 250,000 workers in the public and social services and transport in South Korea. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this panel. Today, I will present the trade union activities to urge the Korean government to ratify the fundamental conventions since its accession to the ILO, the achievements and lessons learned since the ratification of the fundamental conventions, the remaining challenges, and the trade union response. The Korean government ratified the ILO Fundamental Conventions number 29, 87, and 98 in 2021, 30 years after the South Korea joined the ILO in 1991, and they will now have the same effect as domestic law from April 2022. When South Korea joined the ILO in 1991, the government decided to reserve ratification of 3 of the 172 conventions, including conventions of 87, 98, and 151. The Korean government decision was widely criticized by the labor community at home and abroad, notably by Monica Wolf Mathis, then president of Public Services International, who visited South Korea in 1992 to study the labor situation in the country and criticized the South Korean government's attitude. After joining the ILO, South Korea was admitted to the Organization for Economic Development and Cooperation, OECD, in October 1996. At the time, some European members demanded South Korea revise some labor law provisions that were inconsistent with international labor standards, such as the non-recognition of trade union pluralism, and the OECD called for the ratification of ILO Conventions 87 and 98 at the time of South Korea's accession, which the government promised to do. However, this promise was not kept for 25 years until 2021. The Korean Council of Trade Unions, the predecessor of the Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, KCTU, and other labor organizations joined forces in June 1992 to form the Korean Workers' Joint Task Force for the ratification of ILO conventions and submitted amendments to 5 labor-related laws to bring them into line with international labor standards. In addition to mass mobilizations, online petitions, and various campaigns, Korean unions then used the Committee on Freedom of Association to denounce South Korea's anti-labor practices internationally and to pressure the government to ratify the ILO's fundamental conventions. Since the KCTU filed case number 1865 in December 1995, one of the longest running cases before the CFA, challenging the incompatibility of several provisions of the Korean Trade Union and Labor Relations Adjustment Act, TOLA, with the principles of freedom of association and the unfair dismissal of civil servants for strikes. The KCTU has filed 20 cases with the CFA. 4 of these 20 cases, or a fifth, were filed after the entry into force of the fundamental conventions, including case number 3430, violations of the right to collective bargaining of public sector workers, filed as a joint complaint with PSI last June. The fact that a fifth of the cases filed with the CFA in the last 20 years were filed after the convention came into force in April 2021 shows that ratification of the convention does not automatically compel governments to respect international labor standards, and that it is the constant struggle of trade unions that makes this possible. Nevertheless, the ratification of the ILO Fundamental Conventions is a great achievement, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank PSI for their support to the trade union struggle for the ratification of the ILO Conventions by the Korean government over the past 30 years. While there has been progress in Korean society's awareness of fundamental labor rights in the ILO since the ratification of the fundamental ILO conventions, not many workers have felt the impact of ratification because Korean trade union laws and practices are still inconsistent with the ILO conventions. This is probably because the symbolic step of ratifying the ILO conventions has not been accompanied by improvements in the Korean legal system, increased awareness among workers, or changes in government attitudes. In particular, as noted in the APRAC statement of March this year on the Korean government's repression of fundamental labor rights, the raiding of union offices by the National Intelligence Service, the repression of legitimate strikes by owner-drivers disguised as self-employed workers, and the violation of union autonomy through the forced disclosure of union accounts continue to be labor practices inconsistent with international labor standards and the principles of the freedom of association. In this regard, the ILO immediately accepted the request for intervention made by the KPTU and others, and on 2nd December, opened an intervention procedure on the government's repression of the legal strike by the KPTU Troxel. Based on the development under the right-wing conservative Korean government over the past year, the ratification of the Fundamental ILO Convention is an important step forward and an important right for workers to fight for. But what is essential is a trade union strategy for struggle and organizing to change society after ratification, rather than excessive expectations of the phenomenon of mere ratification of the conventions. In response, Korean trade unions are fighting to ensure that ratification of the conventions leads to real changes in Korean labor laws and practices. The first is the struggle to amend the TOLA to bring Korean laws and institutions into line with the ILO conventions. Articles 2 and 3 of South Korea's current TOLA deny workers status to disguised self-employed workers, such as owner-drivers, deny employer status to prime contractors, and allow employers to claim damages for strikes. In order to pass the amendment bill in the National Assembly, various struggles such as online petitions, press conferences, debates, mass rallies, and hunger strikes have been carried out from 2022 until now. The second is the struggle for the right to collective action and basic political rights for teachers and civil servants. The South Korean government regulates trade union activities through a separate special law that severely restricts the right to collective bargaining on wages and prohibits teachers and civil servants from any form of collective action. In addition, South Korean teachers and civil servants are denied all basic political rights on the grounds that civil servants are constitutionally required to be politically neutral in order to protect them from undue political pressure from the ruling party. In response to these restrictions, the ILO Committee on Freedom of Association and the United Nations Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights have repeatedly urged the South Korean government to amend the law. Finally, there is the struggle of public sector workers for direct negotiations with the government. As noted in the conclusion of the ILO CFA case number 3430, all the working conditions, including wages, of public sector workers in South Korea and public sector policies such as privatization, which profoundly affect their working conditions, are in fact determined by various government guidelines, making collective bargaining between the union and the public institution a mere formality. As recommended by the ILO CFA, the KPDU is demanding that the head of the government determine working conditions, including wages and public policies such as privatization, through direct negotiations with workers. Therefore, since June this year, the KPTU has been carrying out mass mobilizations and struggles, including strikes and public campaigns, such as the QPS Festival, to demand the collective bargaining. In particular, according to a recent survey of 1,000 citizens conducted by a professional survey group commissioned by the KPTU, the majority of citizens believe that working conditions in the public sector should be determined through collective bargaining, proving that it is unjustifiable for the government to unilaterally determine working conditions in the public sector. Therefore, in addition to the struggle for the revision of the TOR law in line with the ILO principles of freedom of association, the KPTU carried out and is carrying out joint strikes from September to November in various sectors, including hospitals, railways, metros, and social security, under the slogan of strengthening the publicness of public services and ensuring trade union rights for all workers. I would like to end my presentation by expressing my gratitude to PSI and its affiliates for their great support in our struggles to strengthen public services and secure trade union rights for all workers in South Korea. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Suu for your presentation and in the capacity to fight and the strength of representation that a trade union has always at the forefront of the movement and the forefront to defend the demands of Korean workers. Before moving on to the last presentation, I would like to say once again you can put questions and that you take your telephones because we're going to be having a new exercise that before was a question against employers, but with your emoticons I would ask you to put a word in the language, in your own language, a word of hope. And the idea is here, the employers at the ILO representing a corporative power alongside the attack against the right to strike over the past years did already start attacking collective bargaining. In this sense, the scope, in this case, Convention 98, right-wing governments hampering collective bargaining in the public sector. Please leave one word on the screen which represents the meaning of collective bargaining for the delegates here, of the delegates of the PSI. I've chosen a word which is triumph, because indeed, for us, collective bargaining is the success, it is the possibility of converting our claims into a right. So let us see how the words are appearing: power, solidarity, strength, works, I think, that do represent us, and words on which we work a lot. Thank you very much. As we continue watching the words strengthening on the screen, as they are repeated by several members: power of workers, union rights, solidarity, it is interesting to see how the different languages are also giving a sort of a painting which I think fully reflects our feelings. Very good. And now I'm going to give the floor to Dalia. Dalia Yasser Fita works as a specialist in the categorization of old manuscripts in the Manuscript Center of the Alexander Library. She is a member of the Staff Solidarity Movement in Alexandria. She is also a member for the MENA region as a young trade unionist, and she is mainly concerned with youth and digitalization, and she has taken part in different training courses on this issue. And she will take on future trainings in this area. Dalia represents the most difficult collective to seduce. That is the inclusion of young people in unionism. It's still a problem which is difficult to solve. The question to Dalia is the following: what do we have to do as trade unionists to be able to reach out better to young people? Is it a question of communication, or is it a disconnection or a lack of interest in the cause of unionism, or are there other reasons? The floor is yours.
شكرا لحضرتك وشكرا للبي اس اي على الدعوة في المؤتمر.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the Public Service International for taking up this issue. Marcelo, I'd like to give you some information about our region. The Arab region is one of the worst one when it comes to civil liberties in general terms and labor rights in particular. Workers and activists are constantly being persecuted, and they can be subject to arbitrary arrests. And as a result of it, many Arab countries, such as it's a case in Algeria, for example, where trade unionists have been accused of being terrorists. Two of them are here with us today because they are refugees here in Switzerland. They were accused of being terrorists. We all know what happened to a foreign trade unionist in Egypt. I can't give you his name, but I think we all know him well.
The case of Julio Reni.
الإعلام الأوروبية تناولت الحدث دي لمدة طويلة جدا.
I know that it's been discussed at length in European fora. There are other militants, other activists who work for the trade unions in the Arab world and who have also been exposed to this sort of treatment. Say quite frankly, I don't know what fate awaits me when I go back to Egypt. Marcelo, I think that you and your colleagues from Latin America, you know exactly what sort of situation I'm talking about. It's very similar to what went on in the 70s in Latin America. Unfortunately, now young people in Latin America don't seem to be aware of the similarity.
We indeed suffered in our region as a lot in the rest of the world. I would like to say this, was maybe you not all know about this. I will tell you what this means. Well, Julio was a young Italian researcher, a university researcher who was was carrying out some research work precisely in Egypt on the trade union movement. He went to study the reality of the union movement in Egypt, and he was arrested. He was taken hostage by the Secret Service in Egypt. He was tortured to the hilt, and he suffered a lot of torture, just as my colleagues did in the military dictatorships in my area of the world, and he was found murdered in the most violent way possible. Worst thing you can imagine. These were the circumstances that the trade union movement has to go through in many parts of the world. In our region, we have one of the countries, such as Colombia, for instance, which is one of the most dangerous countries to be a trade unionist. But we are faced with a very serious situation that is now being described to us by our colleague Dalia today. Sorry for my interruption.
I'd like to describe the situation to you in the Arab world. In Palestine, where public service workers, medical staff, ambulance people, ambulance staff, teachers, and others are still humanitarian targets. Two of our Palestinian colleagues were meant to be here at the Congress. They weren't able to leave Egypt because of the blockade and the siege. We're in touch with them on a daily basis just to make sure that they're still alive, they and their families. Unfortunately, this is still the situation that obtains in Palestine. It's a daily situation in our part of the world. We wake up every morning to devastating news about what's happened in Libya, in Syria, in Iraq, people executed, killed, bombarded. So when we hear people speak about discrimination and decent working conditions, of course, we are sympathetic, and that's the very least we can do. We feel for you, but for young people, other young people, the main concern is to simply stay alive. I am here today to tell you about my experience as a union activist. My trade union, the Union of the Alexandria Library, was founded in 2011. Most of the staff at the library were members at the time, so though we're a small union compared with the main labor unions in Egypt, nonetheless, we are independent, we are autonomous, and that did not appeal to the powers that be, and they set up a different government, which is the ally of the governments, and we were pushed into joining this other new union. So that is the situation in my country. They even issued an ordinance or a decree. It's an binding administrative resolution where they reject union pluralism, which flies in the face of all the international labor standards. So that means that we are not allowed to levy fees, affiliation fees. We have no protection whatsoever. Our bank accounts have been frozen. I'm here today attending this Congress. And actually, I said that I was on holiday. So I'm lucky to be able to be here. That's what lucky means in Egypt today. It's not a problem of communication. It's a problem to do with expectations. When I ask a young colleague to join the union, the person will say, "Can the union protect my life?" And obviously the answer has to be no. In Egypt, the ILO was not able to save the European citizen we talked about a moment ago. So the situation, well, any young people who consider joining a union in Europe are aware of this. These circumstances have not prevented me and my colleagues, don't prevent us from continuing to do our union work. We work daily to improve the working conditions of our colleagues. We do everything we can to do away with precarious work. We get involved in legal proceedings in order to guarantee or ensure that young people are given permanent contracts, not temporary work contracts. And we also struggle to ensure that we provide that people are given decent working conditions. We try to explain the principles, the basic principles of union action to our young members or to young people we work with and tell them how they can join the union. The affiliates organized a workshop for the informal sector, the construction sector, and we told them about achievements that had been made in the agriculture sector thanks to these efforts. Given the conservative standards in my country, which limit the extent to which women can be involved in public life, because of the conservative situation, we've had to adopt quotas for female representation in union bodies to ensure that they are actively and effectively involved in the daily life of the unions. We emphasize how important it is to get young people involved in trade union work. If they stay away, then the unions will die off, slowly but surely. I don't know. As I said, I leave my house in the morning and I don't know if I'm going to be back in the evening, but I keep telling our young colleagues that they are the future of the labor world. It's their turn. Thank you.
In our culture, we would give you a big hug, but we know that is not the case in your culture. The Congress has just given you a hug by saying that your testimony has been a very important one and does reflect your struggle and the struggle of many, and reflects the very meaning there is of having an international trade union movement. When I was presenting the panel, I was saying that trade union rights are at the very heart of PSI, and indeed, because that's where we have to start our struggles, and that is where we have to complete our struggles and draw up our roadmaps quite clearly. We have to pool our efforts in solidarity for those colleagues who most need it. We only have 10 minutes. We had planned the questions through the system on where we're going to be moving forward. We'll have to do things slightly different. So we now have about a minute and a half each for a final comment or reflection on what the international trade union movement's priority is to defend union rights. And do you feel optimistic or pessimistic regarding the future? The floor is yours.
In my opening, if we believe in the movement, if we believe that workers want us to struggle and want us to fight, then we don't have the luxury of being pessimistic. We have to be optimistic. We have to believe that we can win. We have to believe that we can bring in young workers. I'm never happy to say you're the future of the movement. You're the now of the movement. If we don't recruit you now, there will be no future. So I'm very optimistic. I know there are challenges, but I think the workers we represent expect us to be optimistic, and that optimism means fighting for rights, fighting in the workplace to ensure that every worker around the world has the right to join and to be represented by a trade union. So I'm voting, if we get the chance, for optimistic.
Frank?
Well, I mean, we have no choice but being optimistic. But I think our optimism must be followed by what we're doing. And I want to give you maybe one thing which comes out of the ILO. The ILO has adopted a decision of the Article 33, which means sanctions about a government which does not fulfill the ILO standards or the Convention 87. It's the first time in the history of 100 years we did win this, that the government should take action against the government of Belarus, because there are 50 of our friends and colleagues are in prison there for using their right of freedom of association and of protesting against the participation of their country in the war. And others had to flee in the country. They set up an organization in exile, and they are mobilizing help that their comrades in prison can get medicine, can get some food, that the families can live, and that the people come out of prison have support, and they keep on working on an idea: what is the Belarus, what is the country we as unions won when we have won the fight against the dictatorship? And this gives me optimism that people who came out of prison, who had to flee their country, they stick together, they build solidarity together, and they count of all of us in this room and outside that we stand with them, and if we stand with them, they can win, and I think therefore I'm optimistic. Thank you.
François?
I would say we have no choice. We are compelled to achieve something, to succeed. We have to stand by the side of the employees and move social progress forward. But we have to be realistic, because the battles are tough, and as social tensions increase, the battles are going to get tougher and tougher. We have to be very vigilant, and we always have to show solidarity. When I listen to what my colleague here was saying, I tell myself that solidarity is probably the most important word. That's what's going to keep us determined and help us to believe in what we're doing, because it's solidarity and assistance to the other workers. That's what's going to move us forward.
Well, I think there's no easy way to win, workers' rights. But I think there is hope for the future of the trade union movement if we organize and if we maintain the militancy for a democratic trade union movement with ourselves. Then I think we will win. So we always say that the important thing is fight until we win. So I think that's the way to go, I think.
داليا.
أعتقد أن أنا سأكون متفائلة بعض الشيء.
I think I'm going to strike a relatively optimistic note. I'm not only talking about Egypt or the Arab world or Africa. We're here at an international congress with people from all parts of the world, and we can stand in solidarity all together. Those who need solidarity, those who have specific needs, they can be helped by the other colleagues, and that's what gives me optimism.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to you all. I think we have had very important contributions from what our coming discussion is going to be. We're going to talk about union rights, trade union rights in our plan of action. I think it is a chapter that will help us to remain on the forefront of the struggle to defend the interests of workers. Thank you very much.
He said we'll take over. I don't have to do anything with this mic. Yeah, okay. Okay. Hello, Congress. If you could come back to your seat, let's settle down. All right. So we would like to begin. We are, behind time. I'm Annie Enriquez Heron. I'm the president of PS Link Philippines and PSI vice president for Asia Pacific. And I have the pleasure of chairing this session, which was preceded by an excellent panel. But before we proceed, I would like to call on the Standing Orders Chair, Chartan Lun, for some information and a report on their meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Dear Congress, Standing Orders Committee has had another emergency meeting this afternoon. That's to deal with two issues. One is the emergency resolution of Ukraine that we want to shift from dealing with tomorrow till this afternoon. I'll come back to the details. The other one is on Resolution 5 with the amendments 64 and 65. We had a complaint after the vote we had earlier because it was, and we have to agree with that, it was quite confusing. We will now suggest another way to do it, and hopefully that is clearer. But to take the Ukraine resolution first, we will do that around 5 o'clock sometime. And if you want to speak on that, you need to hand in the request at the latest at 4:45. So at 4:45. That's because the Ukrainian delegation will leave tomorrow morning, and we think it's fair to deal with that resolution when they're actually here. Then to the voting on Resolution 5. There was a lot of confusion, so we have decided to do it in a different way. Amendment 65 changes the resolution a lot. That's why we will say that the substantive resolution is number 64, and we will put the two amendments up against each other. That means that if you vote for Amendment 64, you cannot at the same time vote for Amendment 65. You have to choose between the two amendments, so you either vote for 64 or 65. And then the one with the most votes carries, while the other one falls. And we will repeat that when we come to the actual voting. And that will be taken about the same time as the Ukraine one. So we can do both those in a break in the trade union rights session. I hope the Congress can accept that.
Thank you very much, Chartan, for that information. Congress, this session will deal with Program of Action, Section 5, Trade Union Rights and Labor Rights. We will also debate on Amendment 49 to the Program of Action, Resolution 18 with Amendments 71 and 72, Resolution 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23 with Amendment 75, Resolution 36 and 37. Also, we're going to deal with Program of Action 3.3 for young workers, and then Amendment 25 to Program of Action Section 3.3. I have, Congress, I have 53 speakers on this list. This is the most debated session, so I apologize in advance because I'm going to have to be strict with the time, speaking time. If you are given 2 minutes, please don't let me stop you, but please keep on your speaking time. And I think I'll have to apply the efficiency of the bullet train, Shinkansen style, in running this session, really. So let me invite Brother Kawamoto of Chichiro, Japan, to introduce Section 5 of the Program of Action, Trade Union Rights and Labor Rights. Brother Kawamoto, you have 5 minutes.
Headset, please.
Greetings to the participants to the Congress. My name is Atsushi Kawamoto from Jichiro, Japan. I serve as the PSI's Vice President and co-chair of the AP region. I would like to make a proposal on behalf of the World Executive Board on the first resolution of the POA on Chapter 5, Labor Union and Labor Rights. The pandemic has led to a renewed awareness around the world of the importance and necessity of public services, but that did not lead to the improvement of working conditions of public sector workers. In order to provide high-quality public service without leaving anyone behind, public service workers need to be able to lead a life of dignity with decent work and decent living wage, with adequate working conditions. These must be guaranteed. In order to gain better working conditions and better workplace environment, workers must have the rights to form a union. to collective negotiations and the right to strike. And they need to be able to exercise these rights. Furthermore, we need to utilize our experiences and knowledge that we gained at work to improve policy, which will eventually lead to provision of better public services. In many countries around the world, public service workers do not enjoy the basic labor rights. Especially in Asian countries. For example, for workers protecting people's lives and living through healthcare or sanitation in the community, they are not recognized as workers, and some of them are not even paid wages, and this is happening today. In Japan, the local public employees can form labor union and they can negotiate collectively. However, their collective agreement rights is not recognized. And obviously, their right to strike is not recognized either. Japan actually is the only country among developed nations where firefighters do not have the right to organize. We believe that the key to securing workers' rights is the ratification and adherence to the ILO's core labor standards, especially Convention number 87 and number 98. These conventions must be enforced through national laws. Rengo, as the Japanese National Center, and PSI-JC are hosting an international symposium this coming 24th of October. The title of the symposium is the Future Measures Against Infectious Disease and Fundamental Labor Rights of Public Workers. We are inviting the Director of Legal Affairs of ITUC, among others, to educate the Japanese public that establishing basic labor rights of public employees through reforms in labor relations, as suggested by the ILO, is indispensable in preparing for the next pandemic. Through these kind of activities, we are determined to continue to fight to demand basic labor rights once more in view of the next International Labor Conference that will take place next year in 2024. We are approaching the end of this Congress. Of the various issues that we have been discussing together on PSI's program of action, we have since 15th of October, I believe that what we are about to discuss here on the Chapter 5 on labor union and labor rights is one of the most important topics that we must tackle. Four French affiliates have submitted Amendment 49 to the EB proposal on Chapter 5.17. They are suggesting to add fight against the criminalization of trade union action against violence towards trade unionists. I'd like to take this opportunity to state here that the Executive Board is in support of this proposal by the French affiliates. Finally, I sincerely hope that through this discussion in this session, we will be able to establish the basic labor rights of as many public service workers as possible throughout the world. Therefore, on behalf of the Executive Board, I'd like to ask you once again for your active participation in this discussion and for you to share your challenges and your experiences. This is my proposal on behalf of the Executive Board. Let's fight together. 共に頑張ろう.
Thank you very much, Brother Kawamoto, for that. I will now take speakers to Section 5 of the Program of Action. After that, I will take speakers for and against the amendments. Can I invite now Sister Emily Esimos from the Confederation of Independent Unions in the Public Sector, Philippines, to speak on Section 5 of the Program of Action. You have 2 minutes, please. Is that microphone working?
Test. Okay, good afternoon. I'm Emily Isimos, a pharmacist profession and the president of the Cadiz City Government Employees Union, and currently the vice chairperson of the Confederation of Independent Union in the Public Sector. Our union expresses our full support for the resolution on trade union and labor rights. The right to organize is a fundamental right of work. We will not be able to improve our working condition, fight for the quality public services, ensure good governance, and push for social change without this fight. It is crucial in the pursuit of our collective interest and shared aspiration. Thus, CIU together with the Public Service International Philippines affiliates are jointly lobbying for the enabling law of the ILO Convention 151, which was ratified by our country due to PSI Philippines' successful trade union rights campaign. This enabling law will enable us to exercise our right to strike. We are also pushing for the ratification of ILO Convention 190 on the elimination of violence and harassment in the world of work and the passage of new salary standardization law to guarantee just pay in the public sector. We thank our confrade from SAST, Finland, DTDA, Denmark, DGB, and FES Germany, especially the Fagforbundet LO Norway, which is consistently supported for TUR campaign and organizing in the Philippines. Had it not been for them, these empowered women who is speaking before you today would not have happened. We are strongly committed to ensuring the public sector workers are accorded their basic labor rights, including the right to freedom of association and collective bargaining. The workers are the greatest asset of any organization that it is worth every effort to fight against those who try to dim its dignity. The workers united will never be defeated. Good afternoon, mabuhay!
Thank you very much, sister. Can I now invite Graeme Kelly, USU Australia, to speak to Section 5 of Programme of Action.
Delegates, I rise to give a brief report on the PSI Oceania activities around ILO Convention C151. In Australia, we have seen Conservative governments introduce policies that violate public sector worker fundamental rights, including arbitrary wage caps, restriction on collective bargaining, and individual contract regimes. The suppression of public sector wages not only dire for public sector workers, but is also suppresses general wage growth. To get wages moving, it is critical that public sector workers are afforded their fundamental rights. On the 23rd to 25th of May, public sector unions from Australia, New Zealand and Pacific Island countries met in Auckland, New Zealand for Public Service International Oceania Regional Advisory Committee. We reaffirmed our commitment to the ratification of ILO Convention 151 to ensure trade union rights of public sector workers and passed the following resolution. Public sector workers all too often bear the brunt of neoliberal ideology, including the loss of collective bargaining and the right to take industrial action. We call on the governments of Oceania to meet the public sector union representatives to progress the ratification of C151. ILO C151 is an important international legal instrument first adopted in 1978 that requires ratifying states to establish and promote negotiation with public service workers. The instrument also emphasises the protection of public sector employees from anti-union discrimination and undue interference. It clarifies public sector workers' fundamental rights, including under freedom of association and protection to organise and right to organise and collective bargaining. Ratification of C151 would further demonstrate that Australia under the Albanese government is a proactive global citizen committed to international labour standards and decent work for all. Australia should have ratified this convention many years ago. In several countries across Asia and the Pacific region, workers delivering vital public services, including firefighters, ambulance workers, nurses, prison personnel, are denied their right to unionising. Ratifying C151 would create momentum in the region to improve labour rights as well as safeguard against future erosion of rights in New South Wales. Delegates, for the past 13 years in New South Wales, nurses, ambulance drivers, police, prison guards have all had their wages capped at 2.5%. Right throughout the pandemic, they delivered services that state would not have been able to operate without, yet the government continued to suppress their wages, a disgraceful action by the New South Wales government. On the 3rd of August, delegates, we wrote to the Federal Minister for Industrial Relations, the Honourable Tony Burke, about the federal government ratifying C151. And in part he said, since we met, I have asked the Department of Employment and Workplace Relations to commence formal consideration of the ratification of convention. My department is preparing a law and practice assessment to detail Australia's compliance with the convention in collaboration with the states and territories and relevant federal agencies. A great move in the right direction for us in Australia and in the Oceania region. Delegates, finally, our Fijian brothers and sisters have had a positive response from the Fijian government around C151, and we call on them to ratify it as soon as possible. Delegates, I commend the report to the conference.
Thank you. Thank you. Just before I call on the next speaker, those who would like to speak on resolution on Ukraine, you have until 4:45 to submit your request to speak. Thank you. So with that, can I invite PSI Allen of Teho, Finland, to speak on Section 5 of the Program of Action, please.
Hyvä puheenjohtaja.
Dear President, dear Congress delegates, in spring 2023, parliamentary elections were held in Finland. They resulted in a right-wing government. The new government program includes major reductions to the rights of employees that hit hard on the female-dominated social welfare and healthcare sector. The greatest threat to the social welfare and healthcare sector is the law proposed by the government that would allow the male-dominated export industry to set the level of pay increases. This would make nurses unable to negotiate their salaries and wages in the future. That would mean forgetting the goal of equal play and leaving nurses with a permanent pay gap. The government intends to also restrict the strike and reduce several other employee rights. This is against international treaties. Our union and the Finnish union movement will do its utmost in order for these goals not to proceed. We have to make sure that we protect the rights of employees. They can change quickly, and therefore, even in Finland, in a Nordic welfare state, we have to continuously ensure that employees are organized and trade unions are able to act. This is the only way to defend the rights of employees. In many countries, engaging in trade union activities means putting your life at risk, as the lives of trade union activists may be threatened and some even murdered. Working conditions are also being weakened, wages and salaries do not keep up with the increase of the cost of living, and governments systematically weaken the capabilities of trade unions. This is also the situation in Finland, with the government program including a long list of reductions to the rights of employees. This shows that we cannot take anything for granted. National trade unions, the international trade union movement, and the valuable, important work of PSI are needed more than ever.
Thank you, sister, for keeping on the time. Can I call on Gopal Prasad Pokharel, Nepal Civil Service Employees Union, Nepal, to speak to Section 5 of the Program of Action. And if other speakers could, approach the microphone once your name is on the screen. Okay. I'll call on the next. All right. Go ahead.
Hello, Jai Nepal. Respected brother and sister from different union and countries, I am Gopal Prasad Pokharel. President of Nepal Civil Service Employees Union, and I am also President PSI NCC Nepal. In the context of Nepal, the government of Nepal has sought to limit trade union rights in the proposed Federal Civil Service Act. Due to our union and pressure, trade union rights have not been cut down currently. This draft is under discussion in the Parliament and it has not been passed by Parliament. Recently, the Union has expressed the solidarity with the demands raised by employees working in local level. Our Union has also supported their movement and will always work for protection of their rights. I am standing here for your global solidarity. Thank you. Jai Nepal.
Thank you very much, brother. Can I invite now Yolanda Haguandoy of USA, Colombia, to speak to Section 5 of the POA.
Buenas tardes. Soy Yolanda Jaguandoy Solarte de la Unión Sindical de Cali
I'm from UC
de Cali, Colombia.
of Cali, Colombia.
Vengo en representación
I
del
am representing colleague José Jus Belugo, who is president of our organization. We support this resolution, and we would like to take this opportunity because we're all meeting here, that is, trade union leaders, the most powerful union leaders of the world. We are aware that today we are faced with new challenges. We are the trade unions, the social organizations which are the most solid in the demand for respect of human rights, in the demand for the rights to life, such as environment and water. Unfortunately, corruption has arrived at our door through neoliberalism, and they use any argument to attack us. And today, I would like to denounce this before the world, that because of absurd and violation committed by a worker in Cali, trade unions are denied their rights. We are going to continue fighting for the trade union autonomy. UCE, for the present, let us act. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're doing well with our time, so let's move on. And I call on Erdal Bozkurt Tumbelsen from Turkey to speak to Section 5 of the Program of Action. Go ahead, brother.
Evet, merhabalar. Ben de tüm belediye
Yes.
ve yerel
Hello, colleagues. I come from Municipality Workers Union of Turkey, and I'd like to greet you all. In our country, too, there are serious issues. But actually, the ILO conventions have been ratified by Turkey many years ago. As public workers, however, we are not able to make use of the provisions of these agreements. First, they came up with a law on collective bargaining, which was later changed to collective agreements. That is because the Grand Chamber of the European Court of Human Rights had required us to, but despite that, the collective agreements made with public workers are almost always pre-given, preset. We call it the stage, because it's all a matter of appearances. We've been taken away our right to collective bargaining. So this law needs to be changed, and we've been fighting for it for years. We also have serious barriers to our right to organize. Many trade unionists are under arrest simply because they have been trade unionists. This severe repression is ongoing because we have an authoritarian regime in Turkey who is hostile to anyone who's not one of them. But of course, they appear and they make it appear as if there are trade unions so comprehensive because they're hand in hand with some, but that is not the case. During the 90s, we set up our union with a great fight, but currently 4,500 of our members have been dismissed from duty because they are members of trade unions. Some have been killed in Ankara, for instance, in 2015, and the case has not been concluded for 8 years. The judges are being changed again and again so that the case is never finished. I have so much more to say, but time is limited. Viva solidarity, viva unity, and viva our
Thank you
fight.
very much. Just before I call on the next speaker, can I just remind Congress that the emergency resolution in Ukraine is advanced for this afternoon instead of tomorrow morning because the Ukrainian delegation is going back. So the table says, the secretariat says that there's still no request to speak. So I'm reminding you that if you wish to speak on this emergency resolution, you have, in 10 minutes, you have to submit your request to speak now. Okay? So I hope it is clear. And I now invite...
The emergency resolution is the resolution on Ukraine. Just clarify that.
Yeah, okay.
Resolution on Ukraine, not the emergency.
Okay, so I'm just reminded that it's the resolution on Ukraine, okay, that we are going to discuss this afternoon. Right. Already, okay, great. So can I invite Sister Helen Skibrook of Pakforbundet, Norway, to speak to section 5 of the POA.
Kjære kamerater.
Dear comrades, listening to the introduction and the debate here in the hall, I feel that we very much on behalf of our members represent the importance of being united. My union is in favor of this proposal and in this section and the amendment from France. It's a clear policy laid out to favor workers' rights and more co-determination in the world of work. The world of work is permanently changing. Solutions to challenges can be found in competence and skills held amongst our membership. It's a major resource if we're prepared to use it. The key to this is tripartite collaboration. It's a constructive cooperation between elected representatives, administration, and labor activists. We can contribute to a better situation in society, but let's not forget that labor rights are also politically controlled and impacted. This is something that we've seen in politics in Norway. For example, we've had arrangements for recognition of unorganized members. However, with a new social democratic government, we saw that we were able to strengthen the concept of workers' rights and the rights granted to them. We must never forget that our role as elected representatives isn't only to fight on behalf of our members' rights, but also in favor of all those whose daily lives are impacted. It is important to our members who hold the political power, and if we want to safeguard workers' rights, we need a strong left in politics. Our combat is for the political rights and trade union rights. Our struggle is local, national, and international. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I invite now Ruben Nunez of Fatun, Argentina, to speak on Section 5 of the Program of Action?
I would first like to thank PSI for giving me the opportunity to be able to take part in this Congress. And the General Confederation of Workers of the Universities of the Americas, CONTUR, and I would like to thank my federation, Argentina, teachers at universities, FATUN. Given the consequences mentioned and the problems of mental health problems expressed by different diseases that are triggered as a consequence of the pandemic, just as psychiatric and psychological problems and an increase in suicide in the workplace, just as the risk factors have increased and cases of problematic consumption of psychotropics, illegal psychotropics, alcoholism, and compulsive food eating. Besides this situation of work conflicts that take place in our workplaces now, such as ill treatment, discrimination, psychological and symbolical and gender violence, and unfair competition, abuse of power, and intimidation of workers. Our trade union organizations have accompanied and followed situations of colleagues who suffer from mental problems, but with a lot of limitations because there are not sufficient appropriate bodies to really cover all the needs of professionals. As is established in the World Health Organization, health is a full, complete state of mental and physical health, and not only the absence of disease. And so this situation can be impacted by factors and socioeconomic factors and the social context. Therefore, we have to look into this with integral strategies, primary health care and treatment, and of course also sending people to specialized bodies if necessary. States have to ensure the right to the protection of mental health of all people, and so that they can fully enjoy human rights and those who are suffering from mental problems on our national states. The trade unions should promote mental health protection in their agreements and ensure primary care and ensure treatment. Colleagues, comrades, with unity, solidarity and organization, the working class in the world will continue to work on a permanent basis to fight for social justice, which people over profit. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Can I now invite Enedina Suarez from FETAMSE, Brazil, to speak to Section 5 of the Program of Action.
Good afternoon to all delegates here this afternoon. I would first like to express solidarity for all the trade union leaders who suffer from violence, which is worse than the one we suffer in Brazil. We would like to say that we're in favor of the POA and Amendment 49 in Brazil. Public workers represent 12% of the workforce, some 11 million workers, and 5 million are municipal public workers, which I think shows the strength of public policies at municipal level and the strength of public workers. The work relations are very fragile because of the lack of rights to collective bargaining. We need to have more consistent action so as to put more democracy in these work relations. Very often dialogue takes place because of the pressure brought on and because of this through strikes of public workers. Therefore, we have to the putting into place of Convention 51 and recommendation of the ILO, Recommendation 59. We really suffer from psychological harassment in the workplace. I think this has to be punished, including with the possibility of not being elected. In the state of the Ceará, in the northeast of Brazil, we have public workers at municipal level who are not entitled to certain positions. Laws which were approved in the local authorities without any dialogue, taking the salary away from leaders and monies from the trade unions. Without any democracy, we don't have decent work. We need trade unions which are strong. We need to have rights to unionize without being persecuted. We
we have to be entitled to go on strike, and we have, without the opposition of the judiciary and against those fighting for strikes for basic rights, we need to be able to act without intervention of governments. The power, people in power, not shut up organized workers. It is absolutely essential to have rights. We must not accuse penally those who are fighting.
Thank you very much for keeping on the time. Can I invite now Eledrisa Fatima of Union Marocaine du Travail, Morocco, to speak to Section 5 of the Program of Action. Go ahead, sister.
شكرا سيدة الرئيسة زميلاتي زملائي.
Thank you, Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, freedom of association and the right to organize are considered fundamental rights, fundamental human rights. Well, in Morocco, despite the 2011 constitution, in spite of our labor legislation which protects freedom of association, nonetheless, we continue to witness breaches of labor legislation. First of all, the government, the Moroccan government, has not does not take a participative approach to new legislation on the right to strike. And some articles in this law actually ended up restraining our freedom, or restricting, sorry, our freedoms. And the right to freedom of association restricted, and also there's no protection against, or less protection against harassment at work. The criminal code of Morocco runs contrary to the terms of our constitution and makes it possible on different pretexts to prosecute trade unionists. We note at the same time that labor inspection is also threatening the enforcement of labor legislation and makes conditions very difficult in the workplace. Trade unionists are being persecuted as soon as they form a trade union organization, especially in the private sector. And I'm thinking in particular of contractors. I would also like to mention the fact that unionists' wages are being suppressed. Efforts are made to stop peaceful demonstrations as well. So for all these reasons, we are in favor of the proposals in the program of action. We agree that people must go before profits.
Thank you very much. Can I now invite Gouven Bengihan of KTAMS Cyprus to speak to Section 5 of the program of action?
Yes. Değerli delegeler, sevgili yoldaşlar, sizleri sendikamız KTAMS adına saygıyla selamlarım. Sendikamız KTAMS 1956'da İngiliz sömürge yönetimi döneminde kurulmuş ve Kıbrıslı Türk çalışanların hak ve menfaatlerini korumak ve Kıbrıslı Türklerin varlığını, kimliğini ve dilinin mücadelesini uzun yıllar sürdürebilmek için var olmuştur. Ve bugün de dün olduğu gibi
Brother, can you pause for a while?
Aynı bilinç ve aynı inançla
Brother, can you pause for a while? We have no interpretation.
Sorry?
Just a moment.
Okay.
Is it English? Okay, we don't have interpretation English. Any other language that's not working?
It's in English. English is there.
Okay. Is English on now? All right. Okay, please.
It's fine.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Please continue.
To continue?
Yes, please.
Ve işte bu bilinç ve inançla
Yes, so with
varlık
this
mücadelesine devam
belief
etmektedir.
and with this
Sendikacı
conviction, we
yoldaşlarımla
continue to
sorunlarımız
fight for our
aynı.
rights. And
Hep
we
aynı
share
sorunları
the
konuşuyoruz.
same
İşte bu
challenges with
sorunların
other
esas
trade
temeline inmek
unionists.
lazım.
Our
Bu sorunların temeli
challenges are
kapitalist
more
sistem
or less
ve
the
bu
same, but
kapitalist
at the
sisteme
root of our
hizmet
problems
eden
is the
hükümetler.
capitalist society
Nelerdir bunlar?
and
İşte
governments who
ucuz iş
serve
gücü,
these interests
emeğin
through cheap
sömürülmesi,
labor, through
özelleştirmeler, her
exploitation
türlü
of labor,
ekonomik krizlerin
privatization,
faturasının
through
emekçilere
austerity
kesilmesi gibi.
that
Ancak
actually
Kıbrıslı Türklerin
demands
bir
all
büyük
from
sorunu daha
laborers
vardır.
and nothing from
Yarım
the rich.
asırdır
But for
devam
Turkish
eden
Cypriots,
Kıbrıs
there's another
sorununun
challenge, which
çözümsüzlüğü
is the
sorunların anasıdır.
non-solution
Ve bu
of
sorun
the Cypriot
çözülmediği
problem, of the
müddetçe
Cyprus
Kıbrıslı
problem. And
Türklerin
unless
sendikal
the
mücadelesi
Cyprus
her zaman
problem is
yarım
resolved,
kalacaktır.
our
Ayrıca
rights
Kıbrıs
for our
Cumhuriyeti
fight
2004
for our
yılında
labor rights
Avrupa
will
Birliği
be
üyesi
in
olmasına
vain.
rağmen
And although
bizler
the
Avrupa
Republic
Birliği
of
üyesi
Cyprus
olmamıza
became a
rağmen
member of the EU, and
Türkçe
although we
resmi
are
dil
members
olarak
of the
Avrupa
EU,
Birliği
Turkish
tarafından
has
kabul
not been
edilmemiştir.
accepted
Bu
as
büyük
an
bir
official
ayrımcılıktır.
language of the
Bu
EU.
büyük
This is
bir
a major
adaletsizliktir. Oysa
discrimination. This
bizlerin
is a
sendikaların en
major
büyük amacı
unfairness
ayrımcılık
against
ve
us. We
adaletsizliğe
trade
karşı mücadele
unionists are
etmek değil midir?
are here to
O
fight
yüzden
against
hep
all
birlikte bu
kinds of
ayrımcılığa
unfair
ve bu
decisions. So let
adaletsizliğe
us
karşı
stand
PSI'dan
together.
destek talep
Let
ediyorum.
PSI
Ayrıca
stand with us
sözlerime
together
son verirken
against this
artık
discrimination. And as I end my
analar,
speech, I'd
anneler
like to say
ağlamasın,
that mothers
çocuklar
should no
ölmesin.
longer
Stop the
cry.
wars.
We need
Long
to
live
stop the wars.
solidarity.
Long
Long
live
live peace. Long
solidarity.
live international solidarity. Long live PSI.
Thank you, brother. Can I now invite Muzibur Rehman from BBSKU, Bangladesh, to speak to Section 5 of the Program of Action. 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Dear sisters and brothers of PSI 31st World Congress, very good afternoon. I am MD Mujibur Rahman from Bangladesh. The trade union rights situation in Bangladesh is not encouraging. Last 15 years, there is no collective bargaining signed among the public sector unions and management. Trade union leaders are not invited even in social dialogue. Union leaders cannot enter into the head office premises of some government-owned electricity companies. Leaders have been harassingly transferred from one end of the country to another. To make the union weaker, management increasing hiring of outsourcing employees in public sector. Outsourcing employees cannot join trade union. Yesterday afternoon, you have seen a video clip in this Congress hall of a outsourcing sewerage worker of Dhaka Water and Sewerage Authority. They are not getting any leave, no festival bonus, no retirement benefit, no safety or protecting equipment. At last, on 6th April 2023, Essential Service Act bill raised in National Parliament in Bangladesh. 18 sectors have been mentioned as Essential Services Act in this bill. If the bill becomes a law, it will be contrary to the fundamental right to a strike recognized by the ILO conventions. The bill has been introduced ignoring the tripartite decision-making process. If the bill becomes a law, the employers and companies exploiting the workers will be forced to accept the oppression like helpless as they do not have the last means of protest. Our national level trade union protest against the bill on 30th September 2023 hold a National Workers' Convention after 40 years of the history of Bangladesh in Dhaka against this bill and ratification of C190. Including 20 more points, demand 21 national level workers jointly organized this convention. And we invite this Congress, please support us to stop this Essential Service Act bill. Thanks.
Thank you very much, brother. Can I now invite Alvin Malificiado from PIPSEA from the Philippines to speak on Section 5 of the Program of Action. 2 minutes, please.
Good afternoon. I am the union leader in the local government representing the Philippine Independent Public Sector Employees Association. In the ETUC Global Rights Index, the Philippines is among the top 10 worst countries for workers in 2023. There is a climate of impunity for a violation of the right of freedom of association in our country. PSI Philippines affiliates, along with other global unions and broad labor movement, have jointly submitted its report and trade union rights violation to the ILO. Just this January, the ILO high-level tripartite mission conducted its investigation and released their findings recognizing the serious violation on the right to organize largely by the state's forces and the lack of accountability in action. At the time of the mission, we reported 68 killings, 3 cases of abduction and forced disappearance, 41 cases of illegal arrest and detention, plus hundreds of cases of union, harassment, red tagging, or terrorist tagging and forced disappearance since 2019. This is absolutely unacceptable. We condemn all attacks and violence against unionists. The PSI Philippine affiliates are exhausting all ILO and UN mechanisms to address this grave violation on our rights. We are lobbying for our rights, enactment of the ILO Convention 151, enabling law to address barriers to the exercise of our right to freedom of association in the public sector, including the non-recognition of our right to strike. Fighting for trade union rights should be a priority for us in PSI. Now more than ever we need strongly solidarity, commitment to defend the right to freedom of association. We support PSI's program of action on trade union rights. Solidarity forever, mabuhay!
Thank you very much, brother. Can I now invite Mark Dustin from NSWNMA, Australia, to speak on to Section 5 of the Program of Action, please.
Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. The right to organise, to participate in a union and to engage in industrial activity undergird and sustain all other labour rights. Accordingly, we must commit ourselves to promote continually the right to organise globally. Internationally, the majority of ILO member states, including Australia, have still failed to ratify key ILO conventions which protect public sector workers, including Conventions 151, 154, and sectoral conventions such as 149 on nursing. At the national level too often the very essential nature of the work that our members undertake is used as a basis to deny the right to organise, to advocate for safety, and ultimately to withdraw labour in support of fair wages, reasonable workloads, workplace safety, and substantive gender equity. It is not enough to have national laws that merely protect the right to union membership. They must extend to real protections, including substantial penalties, which stop the victimisation of member leaders and activists who engage in collective action. Finally, I recognise that formal legal protections for union activists are not, on their own, sufficient to protect members' right to advocate for better working conditions. The foundation of all our rights is in member power and in collective solidarity. In New South Wales, where I am from, nurses and midwives were effectively denied the formal right to engage in collective bargaining during a decade-long Conservative government. Nonetheless, in the face of substantial fines and the lack of a formal legal protection for members participating in organising strikes, thousands of workers went out to the streets over the last 4 years demanding minimum staff-to-patient ratios in public hospitals, intensifying the social significance of our cause and forcing a change in policy in the state opposition and subsequently a change in government. Labour rights are only achieved and guaranteed through real worker power expressed in collective action. Thank you.
Thank you very much, brother. Can I invite now Norma Gomez from FED, CUT, Peru, to speak on Section 5 of the Program of Action.
Good afternoon. I'm Norma Gomez. I'm here to represent this General Secretary, Ulfredo Conte Castro, from the Federation of Workers of Healthcare in Peru. I just wanted to first commend the panelists and take this opportunity to address each one of you and to say how much I recognize and denounce the Peruvian government because they are interfering in our trade union. They are dividing our sector so as to not give us the benefits we should enjoy. Currently, our organization is carrying out a national strike since the 10th of October. And in June, they subscribed to our collective agreement that they now want to disrecognize. There's a lot of workers in the street at national level, which of course is jeopardizing health in Peru for more than 12,000 people who are insured. And this government has interfered through the different ministries so as not to comply with our collective bargaining agreement. That is why I here would like to ask the PSI to address the international bodies and ask that our work rights be recognized and that our collective agreement be respected. It's only through unity and through solidarity at these times for our sector we will get some there. So that is why we're asking for it now.
Thank you very much, Sister. Can I now invite Amelia Alegria from ASC Peru to speak on Section 5 of the Program of Action?
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Amelia Alegria from the Trade Union Alliance for Carter in Peru. I would like to give greetings to Dalia that we heard a few minutes ago during the panel. And I would like to express my solidarity and the solidarity of my sector, but also express solidarity towards all leaders and trade unions who have leaders who are imprisoned and workers who have been dismissed. I come here to say that over the past 2 years in Peru, in 22 and 22, state workers have had 2 years of very harsh work in collective bargaining. But this was possible after 42 years of struggle when we could not negotiate any salary increase. But what is happening now is what we are denouncing, that is the current government, Dina Boluarte and her Parliament and Congress are stopping that these collective agreements not be respected. And it is a government we, state workers and Peruvians in general, have rejected because this government has repressed in a very harsh fashion the responsibility of doctors and others who went down to help the people that were wounded in the streets because the government gave an order, the army or the police murdered these people. This government is responsible for the following of 3 things that we want to call into question. Firstly is the cut in a public budget for collective bargaining when last year we had 360 million as a threshold for 550 workers. She brought it down to 98 million this year. With mobilizations and a lot of efforts and strike threats, we managed to get her to backtrack. Decent work cannot be called decent work with this sort of kind intervention of the government. That is precisely what the government is doing because they're infiltrating people who have no link with public work. They're only there and they're working with the government and the parliament, and the political intention is to leave void the law 31188 for public workers. This government has drawn out provisions that the public prosecutor and the financial ministry revise the collective conventions they have just signed, and also call into question the conventions or agreements where they find that certain situation has been improved with a ready budget of the negotiating body. And the aim of this is to curtail the rights of trade unions and so that the collective bargaining is stopped. Thank you very much. So we do ask that PSI speak up and demand that the Peruvian government do something about what I've just described. But I would also recall that since January this year, we have been asking the ILO for an opinion of the government's intervention, and the ILO has not yet answered.
Thank you very much. So there are no speakers to speak against. So at this juncture, can I invite Danny? We're going back to the voting on Resolution 5. So.
Comrades and delegates, I've been asked on behalf of the Standing Orders Committee to run you through the retaking of the voting on Resolution 5, Amendment 64 and Amendment 65. We acknowledge that there was some confusion in the room when we took this vote initially, and the Standing Orders Committee has discussed this issue, and among a number of options, none of which were perfect, they felt that the least unfair option at this point is to retake the vote in a clear, deliberate manner as soon as possible. And so we've had representations from some of the comrades who said that they would prefer to do the vote tomorrow, because there were some absences in the room today, but we're also aware that there will be absences tomorrow, and so there's no easy way to redo it. So we apologise to those who feel that this is not the perfect solution, but at this point I think we are obliged to take the best solution of those that are available to us. In a moment I will explain how we will take the vote. I should say I've been asked by the Standing Orders Committee to do this, and what I'm doing is communicating the decision of the Standing Orders Committee to you. I have no discretionary power whatsoever. I'm just going to run through the procedure as agreed, and then we will move on. I should say before I commence, and I will commence in a moment, that after this we will conduct the debate on Emergency Resolution 47 on the Ukraine, on Ukraine, and there are 3 speakers. So if those there's an extra speaker, there are 4 speakers now. So if those speakers on Resolution 47 could prepare themselves and make their way to the speakers' microphones, that will facilitate the debate. After that, we will return to the trade union rights section and continue on trade union rights. And it's become clear, as the chair has said, that we will not get the opportunity to conclude the discussion on young workers, and so the decision has been taken that we will do the young workers debate tomorrow, where it can be dealt with in its entirety and given the time that it demands. So with that, I will now explain how we will conduct the vote on Resolution 5. The Standing Orders Committee has asked that we have a vote on each amendment separately, and that Amendment 64 be considered as the substantive amendment. This is in line with the process in the Standing Orders, and if you need clarification, I direct you to the Standing Orders. That is because the mover of Resolution 5 is in favour of Amendment 64, and so in the absence of any other overwhelming reason, that is considered as the substantive amendment. What this means, and this is the most important part in terms of casting your vote, if you are in favour of Amendment 64, when I call it in a moment, you vote in favour of Amendment 64. If Amendment 64 passes, we will not debate Amendment 65 and it will fall, it will lapse, okay? So if you want to vote for Amendment 65, you must vote against Amendment 64. We will only debate Amendment 65 if 64 fails, and that is because they've been judged to be incompatible. So I'll repeat that again. In a few seconds' time, I will call the vote on Amendment 64. If you're in favour of Amendment 64, you vote in favour. If you're in favour of Amendment 65, you vote against. I hope that's clear. Great. What I will also do is, if it's overwhelmingly clear on the first vote, I will invite the chair to call the first vote on the hands. If it's close, we'll use the tellers. But we're not going to spend 15 minutes counting a vote if it's clear to the chair in the first instance. So, we will now deal with Resolution 5, Amendment 64, which is supported by the mover. All those in favour of Amendment 64, please raise your delegate's card. You can lower your cards now. All those opposed to Amendment 64, which means you're in favour of 65, all those opposed to Amendment 64, please raise your cards now. So we think that we know the answer, but we, in the interest of transparency, because it is quite close, we're going to go to a count. And that's the call of the chair. So, are the tellers ready? Patrick? Okay, we will redo that. All of those people in favour of Amendment 64, which means please raise your delegates' cards now and keep them up. I'll tell you when you can put them down. For the moment, please keep them up.
Please keep your badge up there.
So unless there is a teller who has not finished, I'm told all the tellers have counted, so you can lower your badge. We will now move to those against Amendment 64, that being those in favour of 65. If you're against Amendment 64, please raise your delegate's badge and we will commence the count. Please keep them up.
No, wait, I just have to declare which one.
Yeah, I think she's got to declare it.
I have to declare it.
Yeah, because we might need to take a second vote.
Yeah.
It's carried. Sorry? It's carried. I think it's carried.
Yeah, it's carried. Yeah. So amendment 64 is adopted. Hmm?
Yeah,
It's carried.
and Amendment 65 falls.
Yes.
We won't debate it. But let's just get the results though.
Okay.
You can lower your hands. Sorry about that. Come back tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay. No. We have to declare it now. We have to declare now. Yeah.
This will take 10 minutes.
Sorry?
This will take easily 10 minutes.
We can't postpone that. They have to declare. Yeah. No discussion. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's going to be a long day tomorrow. Just say the vote. Discussion. In favor or opposed? In favor or opposed?
Strengthening migrant health workers' rights. Lessons from the pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic impacted severely on migrant health workers due to their exposure to higher-risk clinical settings, poor access to safety protection at work, and insecure employment. A rights-based, socially just, and socially sustainable health worker migration governance is urgently needed. This can be achieved through fair and ethical recruitment. Laws must ensure migrant health workers are treated fairly and as equals, and that migration does not create shortages of health workers in poorer countries. Strengthening the rights of health workers. Workers' rights must be guaranteed by governments and employers. The World Health Organization Code, international human rights norms, and labor standards are fundamental to rights-based and socially sustainable migration policy in the health sector. Social dialogue. All policies and initiatives affecting migrant health workers must be agreed between trade unions, governments, and employers in countries of origin and destination. For this to work in the long term, social dialogue based on a partnership of equals is required. Only through rights-based, socially just, and socially sustainable governance of health worker migration can we realize the benefits of migration and mitigate its negative impacts. The time to act together is now.
Congress, can I have your attention, please? Congress, can I have your attention, please? So this is the result of the voting. In favor of Amendment 64, it's 298. Against, 173. So it is clear, Amendment 64 is carried, which means 65 falls, and we don't have to debate on that. Right?
Okay.
Right. Okay, please settle down. We're now going to deal with Emergency Resolution 47, Solidarity with Ukrainian Workers and People. And I have 4 speakers on my list. So I'm going to invite Lysia Semenyaka from Atom Prospilka, Ukraine, to move the resolution. You have 3 minutes, sister.
Okay.
Dear leadership, dear sisters and brothers, it's not a privilege, it's rather my moral duty to present the emergency resolution on Ukraine. The resolution was developed and submitted by a number of countries from EPSU, the PSI European Regional Organization. Unfortunately, the escalation of war by Russia pushed us to develop this resolution. Only yesterday, at the front line, Ukrainians repelled 53 attacks of Russian army. I would like to remind you that Russian Federation unleashed the war in Ukraine in 2014, and the large-scale invasion was started on the February 24 last year. According to all international documents, this is an unprovoked and unjustified war. As of today, Ukraine has been resisting against the second biggest world army for the 602 days already. Thousands of civilians were killed due to the bombardments and shelling. All the economic sectors destroyed by 40 or 50%. A lot of medical workers, energy workers, state employees were killed during their job duties. Firemen, teachers, nurses, energy workers, those who unmine their territories, work in the very hazardous conditions and at risk of their lives because of war. Russia has deported illegally and forcibly about 20,000 Ukrainian children on its territories. On the occupied territories, our members are kidnapped by Russian occupants from the job places, and then they disappeared. All these war crimes and crimes against humanity should be punished. The world security system should be upgraded, since the current one is not able to ensure the security in the world and to stop the aggressors and terrorist activity which is growing every day. You know, the unpunished evil only is encouraged to exercise another crime. And we see the result. This is a crisis in the Middle East. Middle East, which was the cradle of civilization. The resolution is the message of solidarity to Ukrainian workers and Ukrainian nation. And using this opportunity, I would like to thank you, all of you who are sitting in this hall, all trade unions who supported us last year, sending letters, rendering humanitarian, financial assistance, or wearing Ukrainian emblem on their jacket or dresses. A special gratitude goes to our neighbors, the European trade unions. I call you to support this resolution. You know, the Ukrainian affiliates insisted on more harder version. But this text was supported by the IPSU executive because this resolution is the united message of solidarity to the world, to the PSI itself, and to the Ukrainian trade unions. And as the ILO Deputy General Director Celeste Drake was telling in the opening session, that we need today unity as ever before. We need umoja. And the main task of the modern trade union movement is to prevent such situations like wars, developing in their own countries democracy, defeating the right-wing parties, and promote trade union supervision, trade union control, and achieving of social justice. And that's why I ask you to support this resolution, and I ask you to support Ukraine. Україна переможе.
Thank you very much. Can I now invite Liz Snape, Unison UK, to speak in favor of the resolution?
Thank you, Annie. Liz Snape, EPSU Vice President and Unison. I'm proud to be supporting this motion alongside my friend Letsia. Congress, as trade unionists, international solidarity sits at the heart of all we do. And that's why I was so proud that my own union, Unison, was one of the first to categorically condemn Putin's invasion of the Ukraine. And we continue to show solidarity, not just in words, but in actions. We continue to mobilise support across our union, making donations for emergency goods. And that is why a team of Unison members from London Ambulance drove thousands of miles across Europe in a humanitarian convoy, delivering ambulances packed with medical supplies for those gathering on the Polish border. Small acts make a big difference, and that's why we should never underestimate the power of our solidarity, however big or however small. But as we pass the 600th day of this terrifying war, this motion calls on us all to redouble our efforts. As the eyes of the world shift to the Middle East, we cannot let this war fade from the media or fade from our minds. Congress, the Russian invasion has caused untold devastation to this proud nation. The brutal bombing of hospitals, nurseries and council buildings are barbaric acts. These public services offered the last pillars of support to a nation under siege, and we must loudly condemn these actions. The emergency motion before us is clear. We must be resolute. The only route to peace and freedom is through true solidarity with our Ukrainian unions and the Ukrainian people. In our fight for peace, in our fight for solidarity, please support this motion. Slava Ukraina!
Thank you very much. Can I now invite Barbro Andersson, Kommunal Sweden, to speak in favor of the resolution?
Is it working? Yeah. Tack för ordet och tack kära kamrater i kongressen.
Thank you, fellow Congress participants. I'm Vice President of Kommunal, the Swedish Municipal Workers' Union. We organize people from childcare workers to funeral assistants. I have been entrusted with the task of speaking on behalf of the Nordic delegation and EPSU. As many others have already mentioned, it's now 600 days since Russia invaded Ukraine. And every single day, Russia has continued to perpetrate crimes against the people of Ukraine. The Ukrainian participants here, the delegates, have been able to tell us exactly what it all entailed. Tens of thousands of lives lost, 5 million internal refugees, 1,147 attacks on care facilities, waterworks destroyed, nuclear power plants mined. In all the darkness and the sorrow, I think it is our duty, for all of us, it's our duty to continue to provide support and stand shoulder to shoulder with our colleagues in Ukraine. And may I remind you all that in this room, looking around this room, what we have is a huge, enormously strong global network, an infrastructure for solidarity and support and help. One example is the Trade Union Lifeline, which is a fabulous network made up of young trade union activists who work on the railways, in the food industry and the gig economy, and they saw to it that relief went all the way to Ukraine. Water purification tablets, sanitary articles, dressings, bandages, and much else was sent in the form of relief, and it reached the people who needed it. This is a practical example of global trade union solidarity. When this war is over, we all have to help to rebuild trade union activity in Ukraine. And that is why I urge you all to give your support to Resolution 47 and demand an immediate cessation of Russia's aggression to Ukraine, that all troops are withdrawn from Ukraine's territory in accordance with international law, that all imprisoned peace activists, trade union representatives and journalists in Belarus and Russia are released, and that the rebuilding of Ukraine is done with the interests of the trade union values and the workers. Thank you. Slava Ukraina.
Thank you very much. Can I invite now our last speaker, Evi Krishnawati, FSP Farkes R., Indonesia, to speak in favor of the resolution.
Thank you. I'm Evi Krisnawati from Indonesia. The war between Russia and Ukraine will destroy the world economic and will ultimately have an impact on the welfare of workers, and we urge the United Nations to insist on the cessation of war. For the United Nations, take steps to send the peace mission to stop the war and find a peaceful solution acceptable to both sides. The other countries should not get involved in the conflict between the two countries, except in the framework of humanitarian and peace missions. We want to emphasize that the Indonesian labor union are anti-war and anti-exploitation. Say no to war, long life PSI. Say no to war, say no to war, say no to war. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister. Congress, that's the last speaker for this emergency resolution number 47. We will have now to vote so that we can adopt the resolution if you support. So can I ask you now to raise your badge, voting card, if you are in favor of the resolution? Okay. I can see clearly. Please put down now. It's overwhelming, but we are democratic. So anyone against, please raise your card. Anyone against? Okay. We have one, two, okay. Anyone who would like to abstain? None.
One person.
Okay, there. Yes.
One more here. Abstention.
Here, abstain. Three abstention. Okay, so it's clear. Emergency resolution number 47 is carried and adopted by Congress. Okay. Okay, emergency resolution 47, solidarity with Ukrainian workers and people, is unanimously adopted. Yes, yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Congress. We will now have to move on. Can I just inform you that we can only proceed until 6 o'clock, and we're going to go back to Amendment 49 of the Program of Action, which means those who are scheduled to speak until 6 o'clock, we will accommodate, and the rest will be for tomorrow. Okay, so we will be dealing with Amendment 49 and Resolution 19. All right. Amendment 49 to Section 5 of the Program of Action is supported by the Executive Board. Can I now invite Muriel Marcillo of FNME, CGT, FDSP, CGT from France to move Amendment 49. You have 3 minutes.
Oui, bonjour à tous. Donc, je vais vous présenter
Good afternoon. I'd like to present Amendment 49. It's important that we combat all forms of attack, be it discrimination or trade union criminalization. All these forms of attack, we must make a distinction between them, just as the way in which the world of union activism responds to it. As trade unionists, we are often victims of discrimination as trade unionists. We find that our careers come to a standstill or that our wages are cut. But we have to find mechanisms that will allow us to protect union activists with clear rules and guarantees that are transparency and social control, but also because it can also be done thanks to the experience we have acquired in our careers as activists. But I think it's important to note, and our debate just now proves it, the repression and attacks on trade unionists are increasing, and it's more and more difficult for employees in companies and public services to speak out. They are gagged. This is sometimes institutional discrimination organized by the government. Order is imposed in violent demonstration. The workers who occupy their workplace are pushed out. The workers are requisitioned on strike. When they're on strike, there's a repressive legal arsenal. Trade union activists are shamed before their families, and there are also sackings, imprisonments, and in some countries, trade unionists are even murdered. This is what we're confronted to today, those of us who are labor activists, we who demonstrate when we do so only to put forward our demands. We've seen this recently in France when there was a popular protest against the new law on pensions. Sébastien Minisquier, our representative, is himself being prosecuted simply because he went on strike. And our trade union democracy and our right to strike is being attacked through him. I would like to thank all those of you who sent us their support and their solidarity in this struggle. But I have to say that this attack on the unions is having a threefold effect. It reduces our capacity to act. The activists are paying a heavy price for it. It also discourages workers from joining a trade union, taking collective action, and standing up for themselves. So what should our collective strategy be? What action can we take beyond the solidarity which we have to put up to protect our dignity and our trade union power? I think the debate we've had here has demonstrated that we have to act together. The employers have never made any concessions. Everything we've achieved, we fought for and won it ourselves. Freedom of association, trade union laws are not negotiable. They are part of the social conquest, and there can be no social conquest without trade union rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Can I now invite Ann Goldman from the American Federation of Teachers, USA, to speak on Amendment 49. You have 2 minutes, please.
Certainly. I rise to remind us that our work can only be accomplished when we can secure our union voices. As the panel illuminated, the threat to security of organizing and working throughout the country is real. As the previous speaker just noticed, as we develop our strategies and strike and take action, we are targeted. We must be able to be safe to secure the rights and the impassioned issues identified during this Congress. We cannot be successful if we do not have those protections. So first and foremost, we must be protected. In the United States, there is pushback going on, and we are proud of those actions. The United Auto Workers are moving forward. Various nursing strikes have occurred. Additionally, the screenwriters, the actors are all on the line. This shows the identification with the strategic need to get the message through. We, labor, will prevail, but the safety and security of each person has to be there as well. We must always remember that is critical. Indeed, we hope that that recognition will accompany all the work we do, because no matter what resolution you spoke to, it goes nowhere if we, labor, are not securing, protecting, and making sure that we are safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sister. Can I now invite Helmut Griobon from ANEF, Chile, to speak on Amendment 49.
I'm Helmut Griot, and I represent the big delegation of the group of fiscal workers in Chile, and we are here to support Amendment 49 on Section 5, especially on criminalization of trade union action. The context and what is happening currently in Chile, I think, is illustrative of this. This year, we're commemorating 50 years of the brutal coup against Salvador Allende's government, and this led to another problem indeed during that time. That is 47 years ago. The disciples of Milton Friedman take over the economy of Chile, and therefore we have the sad record of being the first neoliberal state in the world, and the consequence of this facts to be felt up until today. There was a lot of repression, and trade union leaders were assassinated, amongst which the president of our association, President Martin Jimenez. Really, we pay tribute to the role you played. And there was a labor reform that was implemented that shattered the union movement. Work stability was done away with, and there was a new neoliberal vision of the world that was imposed, which, of course, trampled workers and their rights. And this because they are not because they're just inputs of consumption rather than seen as human beings. Today we have a right which is trying to fulfill its task, and this they are doing on the basis of an approval currently. Currently a lot of laws have been passed on criminalizing the people's expression of discontent and exhaustion with such a model. And furthermore, in our country, we have a right called a freedom right, and their aim is to approve a new constitution. And in this constitution, political participation is banned, political participation of union leaders. Of course, trade union autonomy is really trampled, and the workers' rights are completely trampled too. And this is what pushes us to clearly ask that trade unionism, social and political trade unionism, that really clearly fights for action beyond the sectoral fight for fair pay and balance of negotiations between employers and employees. We have to commit to ensure that we really help our countries, and we have to be in the forefront so that we have a future with social justice. It's only that way that we will ensure people over profit.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Can I now invite Daisy Duarte from PECO Serbi Públicos, Colombia, to speak on Amendment 49. 2 minutes, please.
Hola, buenas.
Hello, good afternoon to you all. I'm Daisy Duarte. I represent the Public Services of Colombia. In a world undergoing many crises, demand from us very complex solutions, be they political, and they also call upon us to carry out actions so as to organize a response by trade unions. Throughout the Congress, we have touched upon the different changes and the transformations that have to be borne in mind in line with all the emerging issues. We have talked about social dialogue, we have talked about negotiation and strike as actions, as the very basis of trade union action. Even though we have conquered our rights, there's still violation of these rights. We're stigmatized, we're persecuted, we are criminalized, and in certain cases we are even murdered, as is still the case in Colombia. Our trade unionists and our trade union organizations are also attacked through by disincentivating people to become members of these trade unions and pursuing those who decide to become a member of a trade union. And just as today, for instance, in Bogota, a trade union license was not granted to take part of a trade union to defend their rights. That is why we invite you to vote in favor of Amendment 49 and to say that to think differently is not a crime. It is a democratic right, and therefore we vote in favor of this amendment so as to give priority to the fight against criminalization, persecution, and against any violent action against workers who unionized. I think we have to give legal protection to unionists. We have to investigate and condemn anybody who's carrying out an action against organizing, and we have to promote the education of our workers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I now invite Juan Camilo from Asemuch, Chile, to speak on Amendment 49?
Buenas tardes. Hablo en nombre de la Confederación Nacional de Trabajadores Municipales de Chile y les pido a este Congreso aprobar la enmienda 49 que complementa y enriquece la sección 5 del Plan de Acción sobre los derechos laborales y sindicales. Lo anterior se hace urgente porque la criminalización de la acción sindical en un contexto de avanzada de la derecha extrema en nuestro país y en el contexto del Cono Sur podría darle una herramienta a los antiderechos.
Please stop. English, is it? Yeah. We're not getting English interpretation. Yeah, we can hear now. Okay. Any other language?
¿De nuevo?
Please continue.
¿De nuevo, Presidenta?
Yes.
Bueno.
Okay. I'm talking on behalf of the National Confederation of Municipal Workers of Chile. And I ask this Congress to adopt Amendment 49, which tallies with Section 5 on trade union rights. This has become extremely urgent because the criminalization of trade union action in the context of moving forward of the extreme right on our continent, in the country of the southern part of Latin America, such as Chile, could give a tool to the right which wants the immobilization of the trade union movement. I'm saying this because in my country we are going through a very difficult situation, both at government level and in the world of work, because the right denies all cooperation to maintain and move forward in more trade union and working rights. For instance, we're in full constitutional process to have a new fundamental charter. Unfortunately, this process is in the hands of the extreme right, and the workers in general, and the workers of the public sector in particular, rather than gaining more rights, we're going backwards, and there is no recognition of the existing rights and denying us or limiting new rights such as decent work, the right to unionization and to collective bargaining, the right to strike in the public sector. Quite clearly, this is a serious threat against human rights and dignity and the interests of all unionization and the workers. And the organizations we are a member of have been fighting, and we will continue to fight so that this erosion and these breaches of union rights. But we do need solidarity, and we do need the support of the global union movement so as to be heard in our demands. Comrades, sisters and brothers, peoples and workers united never will be overcome.
Thank you very much for that. Congress, as we do not have speakers on this amendment, we will now vote on Amendment 49 to Section 5 of the Program of Action. So get ready with your badge. Those in favor, please raise your delegate card. Okay, thank you. Those against, please raise your card. Yes. Okay. Abstain? No? Okay, so it's very clear, Congress. I declare Amendment 49 to Section 5 of the Program of Action carried. Okay. Right. I'm reminded here. We will now have to vote to adopt Section 5 as amended. Okay, since we have adopted 49. So those in favor of Section 5 of the Program of Action as amended, please raise your card. As amended, yes. Thank you. Those against? Okay. And abstain? None. Okay, Congress, I declare Section 5 of the Program of Action adopted. Section. All right. Congress, we will now debate Affiliate Resolution 19, which is supported by the Executive Board. Can I now invite Nompilo Tobela from the Swaziland Nurses Association from Eswatini to move Resolution 19.
Dear comrades, speaking is Nompilo Tobela from Swaziland, currently known as Eswatini. My union is now Shimining National Workers' Union in Swaziland higher institutions. Trade unions in Eswatini continue to face many challenges in the current political climate. The challenges affect our rights to organize freely, take part in industrial action, which is fundamental trade union rights, engage in collective bargaining and collective choose. The Kingdom of Eswatini ratified ILO's conventions on freedom of association and protection of the right to organize, number 87, and the right to organize and collective bargaining, number 98, in April 1978. In addition, trade unions face ongoing violence which impacts our rights to organize and mobilize as trade unions. Trade union meetings are disrupted. Trade union workers are victimized, persecuted, and lose their employment status for participating in trade union leadership positions. Comrade, trade unions leaders are shot at, and there is an ongoing anti-union and anti-democracy harassment. In October 2021, the government issued a directive banning local municipal councils, local government authorities from issuing gathering permits for gathering in towns and cities. The banning was effected on all trade union gatherings. The banning never followed any legislative process, notwithstanding that it was violation of the Public Order Act and the Constitution of the country. As well as these attacks on our rights as trade union movements, the government is on a path of privatization, which further undermines workers' rights, threatens jobs, and pushes more workers into casualized labor. Government National Development Framework 2019 to 2022 focus on the state-owned sector and emphasis on reducing the wage bill, cutting government funding to SOCs, and privatizing. As in so many countries, the World Bank is instrumental in pushing Eswatini to privatize. We are therefore tabling this resolution in the belief that international solidarity of public sector trade unions is a vital part of building our struggle and our all for political prisoners to be released, harassment of trade union leaders to end, for collective bargaining process to be respected and ILO Convention 87 and 98 to be respected. I urge full support of this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister. Can I now invite Ganizani Changa from Wetum, Malawi, to speak in favor of Resolution 19.
Thank you, the moderator. My name is Ganizani Changa from Malawi. Comrades, Congress, ILO Convention 187, 98 talks about victimization and condemns mistreatment of union members as well as leaders. Comrades, Eswatini is on the siege. Union members are being arrested. Imagine waking up in the morning, in the afternoon, being arrested because you are a union member. Fighting for others' rights should not be a guarantee to be arrested. Congress, I beg you, let us act for Eswatini. Eswatini, people cannot gather together as we are. Eswatini people are being harassed, arrested. Others cannot go to work. They are afraid they can be easily suspended. To be associated with union, you can be easily arrested, and you cannot even dare to do union things in Eswatini. People are in prisons, as I'm saying now. Others are suffering. Families are now separated because of being a union leader. Comrades, Congress, I beg you, let us support Eswatini. Solidarity forever, solidarity forever.
Thank you very much, brother. Can I now invite our last speaker, Kwena Manamela from Denosa, South Africa, to speak in favor of the resolution.
Comrades, my name is Kwena Manamela, Denosa from South Africa. Eswatini is one of the smallest countries in Africa. It borders Mozambique and South Africa. Eswatini is an absolute monarch, and its labor laws have historically limited the rights of workers to organize, strike, and engage in collective bargaining. The government has often been criticized for restricting the activities of the trade unions. Many workers in Eswatini earn low wages, particularly in the agriculture and textile sectors. There have been calls for improved minimum wage regulations to ensure that workers can earn a decent living. The country faced high levels of unemployment and underemployment, especially among young people. This has led to concerns about job security and economic stability for the population. There were reports of child labor in Eswatini, particularly in the agricultural sector. This is a significant concern as it affects children's education and well-being. Some workers, particularly in the mining and construction sectors, have experienced unsafe working conditions. Occupational safety standards and enforcements were issues of concern as well. The government had a history of suppressing dissent and protest, including labor-related demonstrations. This has made it difficult for workers to advocate for their rights. Labor laws in Eswatini were seen as inadequate protecting workers' rights. There were calls for reforms to strengthen labor protections. Amanda.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, Congress, we will now vote on Resolution 19. So be ready. Those who are in favor, raise your delegate badge. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? So Congress overwhelmingly, Resolution 19 is adopted. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm
I need to conclude fast now because it's 6 o'clock. So let me just tell you what we have not covered, which will be, dealt tomorrow in the morning. We are going to move till tomorrow, Resolution 18, 20, 21, 22, 23, 36, and 37. The Young Workers, Section 3.3 of the Program of Action, Resolution 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 38. And then there's the standing orders. For tomorrow, in the agenda, Section 4.2 of the Program of Action, Climate Crisis, Resolution 17 and Amendment 68, Section 7.4 of the Program of Action on Utilities. Okay? So if you want to speak tomorrow morning, except for those who have, who have submitted their request form for today, you must submit your form now. Okay? Okay. So there will be a standing orders committee meeting. So the members, you are notified that there is going to be a meeting after this. Any announcement? That's all? Okay, thank you, Congress. That concludes our session. Thank you all very much for being patient.